woman is Okay, can you hear us?
Yeah. Here comes Mr. Peters.
Oh, yeah. What happened? Was it lightning strike?
Today?
Yeah.
Did your power go out today?
Oh, yeah, you.
Hey, Dave, you're on mute. Can you hear us okay?
Keep in mind where power comes from.
I can.
You can hear us okay?
I can.
Okay, excellent. I'm gonna put us back on mute, sir.
Because I can tell what the elements for the hurricane.
All right, I'm gonna put us back on mute till we get ready to get started, okay, Dave?
That works.
Okay, Fran, can you hear us?
Breakers to the inline, the double.
Fran, can you hear us okay?
Electronic. And about the time I said I've had enough, it went off and stayed off for 14 hours.
At your house?
Yeah, now I'm unmuted.
Okay, there you go. Sounds good.
Okay.
I guess we don't,
Yeah.
we're not on the same one. We're probably on fire time in here
Anybody know a good
on
electrician?
this combination.
Down.
Do you want me to tell them the time? I don't know what.
Basically waterproof.
Should I just put like right now, 6:30?
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right now, it's funny, because I got a storage shed down there. Hours in that, it's just the outside.
It just doesn't
I flip a switch, went in the circuit
I know
breaker.
your own, to 25-year-old daughter who's married.
Are you sure you don't have a GFI somewhere?
I'm a 23-year-old son.
That's right, I can't picture it.
My daughter has.
That's where our
Yeah.
school, and it would not
Yeah.
have a plug.
Yeah.
I looked at every, maybe I'll just go to every one in the house and see.
And over the sink maybe?
Yeah, we had some stuff for a porch getaway. One of the pots.
Are we're just waiting on Mr.
About 28 years.
I'll give it till 6:35 and then we're starting.
It was GPS at 6:33.
All right, we're starting at 6:35.
Starts with, yeah.
We're done by 8.
Is that what it is?
Have you checked your breakers?
There'll be a
Yeah,
little
check
something
them all.
extra in your
Because now
Thank you.
on the new houses, you have all the breakers, they're not on the outlets anymore, you're having breakers themselves.
I flipped every one of those.
Mr. Peters, can you hear?
Yes. Did they have a white button on it?
Awesome.
It was incredibly loud. Now I turned it down a little bit, so,
You sound like
Can you
we're-
hear me now?
yeah.
Can you hear Tom? Say
Dick, hey Dick, can you hear me?
Tomorrow.
All right.
it. Can you hear Tom?
Dick, can you hear me?
That's all that counts, right, Tom?
Yeah. Do I have to spray again? Can you hear me now?
I'm giving it just 2 minutes, guys, then we're gonna start, because Mr. Eads will be here soon.
All right. Is he stuck in traffic?
Yes, as a matter of fact.
Perhaps the only good thing about this whole virus thing is I've talked to some random guy at this grocery store. He drove down from Chicago and he said there's like no traffic on the roads all day now.
We were thinking about going to Colorado for a long weekend and the airline, like, I mean, it's incredibly cheap.
Yeah, they are.
We'll be the only
Keep your
ones there.
fingers crossed, because Jason and I are still trying to do our.
Hi,
honeymoon
how are
in September, we've already booked and paid for it, and right now, they won't let Americans in.
Where were you going?
I forgot my mask in the car.
Rome, Positano.
So I-
Nice.
Good.
Sometimes you come over, we got a painting above our table, it's just a room deal.
Oh, really?
It's a hotel we stay in, we always stay the same place.
Where is it that you were gonna go?
Positano, it's on the Amalfi Coast.
Mm.
If you think about the old World War II movies where you see the trucks, army trucks driving around the mountains with you, that's the Amalfi Coast.
Well, I was looking online at trips
Oh,
and they
really?
were talking about having
I'll
to,
tell you, Positano.
you have to have a negative COVID test in some
Hi,
places.
Brian.
Some of them were within like 7 days or something, and they're taking longer than that to get the test results back.
I know.
I show you a picture.
So what good is it?
Well, she put a spot in them.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
See it right on the back of the bus.
Deb, are we live? Are we ready? Okay. Laura, are we ready on your end? Okay.
She was scared to death and she was ready.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm gonna call to order the Board of Aldermen meeting for Thursday, August 6th. And I'm gonna ask Alderman Grant for the invocation.
Please stand. Bless this town and may it remain a beautiful and friendly place to live. We pray the board makes fair and informed decisions tonight. We also pray for our police officers, firefighters, and members of our armed services here and around the world, that they remain safe as they risk so much for our security. We pray that our town be spared the ravages of hurricanes and other natural disasters, and that everyone associated with the town remains safe and secure. Amen.
And pledge of allegiance.
I pledge
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
Second?
Second.
You got you.
Discussion,
Yes, sir.
under the new business, CISPC appoint citizen representatives, we also need to add another item there, congressional delegation visit discussion.
Any second to that or any
I'll second
discussion?
that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any other changes? So do we have a motion to approve the agenda as modified? Mhm.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Managers report.
In the interest of time, I won't read the manager's report, which I supplied to you last week before the storm. I did want to run through two things. First of all, Laura and Caitlin have been working on this Golden Leaf Foundation and trying to get us some increased funding for both the park and for the town hall. And today we were informed that they have approved a $100,000 grant for mitigation for the town hall for those storm additions that we want to do, the roof and the high windows. So that will go a long way to bringing some of the cost down on the optional bid items.
I'm sorry, Dave, is that the hurricane window?
Yes, sir.
And the metal roof too,
And
right?
yes, the fortified roof. So that was a nice get for us today. As far as the hurricane, of course, it struck Monday evening, and based on the forecast, we did not activate or not formally activate the EOC. We advised the Onslow School District that we would not be using the school as an EOC and offered to help them if they ran into any problems. The police patrolled throughout the night. They closed the bridge at just about midnight, reopened it at 4 a.m. We really had no incidents or problems. There was nobody out on the road, thank goodness. Fire department had a very busy night. There were 14 calls, including mutual aid for the Surf City structure fire down at the Surf condos. There was an elevator rescue, several medical calls, and down power lines and the works. So Chad and his people did not get any sleep whatsoever. DPW assisted with those calls, and they also kept an eye on the access, the county access berm that we put up to protect the park. We did have ocean water up against the one side of it. We did not have any damage to the park, so that worked out, although it'll be a while before I'm back in the county's good graces. As far as the administration, we participated with Onslow County in their Facebook Live broadcast. We followed the National Weather Service and the HARVAC information and published that to the town website periodically to keep the residents informed of what was expected to be coming. And the permit people and planning, Deb, completed their preliminary damage assessments, and that was already transmitted over to the county EOC. So we're basically done with the storm, and everything worked out pretty well. There was one ceiling collapse, and the two campers that were flipped over down in the Surf City campground, but there were no injuries involved. So all in all, we did pretty well.
Can I just one comment?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to thank you for doing what you did on the county parking lot.
Oh,
Because if you hadn't done that, we walked by and took a look at that before and after the storm. If you hadn't done that, I don't know what would have happened with the money we just put in that park. Because it would have come, you remember last time we had that water came right across the street.
right.
And I'm not sure any of that stuff would have stayed there, especially the sod and everything.
Right.
else. So I know you got some heat from that, but I for one appreciate the fact you did.
I do
that.
too.
So,
And
Water off a duck, you know.
I also wanted to just say I've received a lot of great positive feedback on everything that the staff did as far as communicating. Everybody felt that they really knew what was going on and was very appreciative of all of the communication as the storm was proceeding and afterwards. And I want to thank you all for everything that you did that night. Thank you.
And just a question for Scott, were they able to take that burn down today?
No.
Never got to the, okay.
Are they pushing us to take it down?
No.
Because I thought that there was another storm out there.
It apparently died out. I was checking the hurricane screens today, and there's nothing forecast for at least the next 5 days.
Okay.
What, is there anything, any harm in leaving it in place? I mean, we're really just at the beginning of our peak portion of hurricane season. Usually the bad month for us is next month. Is there any harm in leaving it there?
Only that it interferes with their construction, what they're doing. It makes it a little hard for their contractor, who is very slow and apparently has some problems anyway. I don't want to make it worse for him.
I just wonder if it's really going to delay anything based on the lack of progress that we have actually seen.
And I talked with Mr. Gilbride about that too. Tom, and what he had said was that it really wasn't a large effort to do that. So if we have to push sand back up there again for another storm, I guess unless they've spread the rock out, then that's a problem. We'll have to figure it out.
Well, hopefully they'll rebuild that dune before they do that.
I don't know if that's in their CAMA permit. Do we know?
Yeah, they supposedly had the CAMA permit to do it.
Okay.
That's why I was kind of annoyed that they didn't. But.
Okay, perfect. Thanking you. Anything else?
No, that should do it.
Okay.
I have a question. Goes back to the revetment committee, and what you reported is very accurate in terms of what happened and when recently. And I was just wondering if we've heard anything further from Foreman.
No, he got an email from a gentleman that lived next to Jerry Hyde, and when he responded to him, he copied me and basically said that he was working on a plan which would put the sandbags, throughout the area that but there was no date, time, or anything forthcoming, and he hasn't spoken to me at all.
Okay, I figured as much. And as far as I see it, it's the ball's back in the litigant's court to get him to move. It's theirs to do. So I was just curious where we were.
Okay. Anybody else? Open forum.
We had 3 comments pre-submitted. The first is from Mr. Lenny Denitis, 408 Ocean Drive. I'm writing this to support the core project that we as residents, current and past mayors and aldermen have put in a lot of work over the years for this project. It will ensure survival of our beaches and island for generations to come. Please continue to support this project. Thank you, Lenny. The second of the 3 comments is from Mr. Kevin Finger of 17 Osprey. The town park restoration turned out great, makes for a great facility for our town and visitors. Tennis courts and basketball courts have had people on them every time I've been over there. Bid seemed high when I first heard about it, but the scope and completed work looked to be fair for the bid. Nice work, thanks. Second, he notes, updates on the recent hurricane were timely, concise, and factual, just what we needed to help make decisions. Much improved. The third and final comment is from Miss Becky Bowman, 106 North Commuter Win. To the discussion about financing the Corps of Engineer project, I will ask that we find a way. This project will mean so much for the future of North Topsail Beach. Property values will increase exponentially when buyers see the wonderful beach that the Corps builds. More will seek to invest here, knowing that the Corps will be taking care of the oceanfront and will continue to nourish the beach and project for our area over the life of the project, 50 years. Property tax revenues will increase. Occupancy tax revenue will increase with more homes rented. Consider that the project may pay for itself over its 50-year life. Extensions for additional years are also possible. Consider that when the Corps builds the berm, that home and town hurricane repairs are reduced, roads and infrastructure are saved, insurance payouts are lessened, possibly leading to reduced rates. Consider that funds currently spent on phase 5 repairs and beach nourishment will be tremendously reduced. These funds can then be used for phases 1 through 4 projects, terminal groin, and methods to save houses in the New River Inlet area. Please assure that the project is not rejected. Most likely there will not be another chance, at least in our lifetimes. Already the town and Corps have spent a tremendous amount of money for bid and fish studies and searching the ocean to find necessary sand. The federal government may not look favorably at a town that abuses its resources. What a wonderful thing for North Topsail Beach. The federal government will fund the core building of the project and then forgive about half the cost. The state of North Carolina will share the remaining cost. All this is done to help North Topsail Beach. We must find a way to pay our share of the project.
Thank you.
The last one.
Okay. And I want to thank everybody for sending in the comments, and please know that while we're in this pandemic and still having virtual meetings, that we do appreciate the feedback and just keep it coming. Okay, public hearings and presentations. So first we've got the Army Corps, and that's Mr. Mickey Sugg and Mr. Greg Curie.
Where you want me staying right here?
Right there's
That-
fine.
that good? Okay, perfect. First of all, I appreciate y'all allowing us to come. I kind of thought about this even before Mr. David, when Brian and I had talked a couple of times, and he had mentioned that you had a new mayor and a new council or alderman. So I thought, maybe it'd be best for me to come in and talk about the EIS and the terminal growing proposal. And so a lot of you aren't in the dark or getting it second, third, and fourth hand. So I wanted to come, not just for me to sit up here and blab, but for y'all to feel free to ask me any question that you have about the process, the timing, of course. I'm sure you have a lot of questions on that. But I'm not sure, I know you probably heard about the Corps and regulatory. Some of you who are new may not know our program, so I'll kind of do some little elementary stuff to begin with. So Colonel here, he has the task of dealing with federal projects that congressmen, allocating money and appropriating money to do. And then he has also the task to lasso his regulatory department and keep us in check. So he's looking at federal projects that are sponsored by congressmen, but at the same time, and regulatory department is not involved in any of that. So the Corps is kind of really split up in two. You have the civil works side and you have the regulatory side. Civil works, they do the planning, the designing, implementing and contracting of federal projects, where regulatory, we don't do any of that. We're basically tasked to review projects that people come and bring to us. And if there is a project that the two laws that we enforce are Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act, navigable waters, and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act is the wetlands you hear about. So we're kind of tasked when people come and wanting to do a proposal, whether it's a terminal growing or a subdivision, a golf course, a Walmart, or just an individual house, if that activity is encroaching in any of those Section 10 waters or 404 waters, then they have to get a permit from the Corps of Engineers. So that kind of triggers why y'all are dealing with a regulatory department with your terminal growing, because the actual placement of the rock structure is within waters of the U.S., the navigable waters. So that triggers the Section 10 as well as the Section 404. So with all that said, having to get a permit from us, so how do we determine whether EIS is necessary? EISs aren't run-of-the-mill type processes. They're only really, I bet the Corps, well, we probably have processed maybe 5 in the last 10 years. Before that, I think it was 1. And a lot of those are associated with terminal growings and inlet management, more sensitive areas. So how do we determine why EIS is required? There are a couple of factors and elements that help us determine whether an EIS is required. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just name a couple. Controversial. If a project is highly controversial, whether it benefits or is detrimental, that could trigger a EIS process. Impacts of being unknown. A lot of times we'll look at review potential projects, and we may not be sure what the impacts are, especially when you're talking about around inlets and you don't know what the shorelines may or may not do. There's a lot of unknowns in that. Wetland impacts could be threatened and endangered species might kick it into an EIS. So those are the kinds of things that when a project is brought to us, we kind of look at those factors and kind of make that decision. Does this warrant a EIS, or can we get it through an EA channel, which takes your time frame from here to about there. So with the terminal growings is a little bit different because the state legislation requires the state to go through an EIS, a state EIS. So that doesn't automatically require the federal government to say, okay, we do an EIS just because the state, but it just a lot of times makes sense. We try to make the process as streamlined as possible, kind of combining the state review and the federal review at the same time versus an applicant going, okay, I'm going to do the state review, and once I get settled with that, I'm going to come and do the federal review, and that again expands your time. So that's kind of we got to the point where in working with the town and working with the previous town manager, or 2 previous, Brian, that's when we had some interagency meetings and some scope, well, I wouldn't call it scoping, but meetings, and we received information from the town, kind of a package. I think ATM provided some a review, enough information for us to say, okay, this project does warrant an EIS. So with the EIS process, what that does is for an EIS, usually you have a third-party contractor to actually write the EIS document, which I'm sure a lot of you know that because you went through the request for recommendations or proposal for a contractor. So what the Corps looks at that third party as a non-biased entity writing it. They're not writing it on behalf of the town, they're writing it really at our direction. Y'all just happen to be paying for it, unfortunately. But if you weren't paying for it and you wanted the Corps to write it, it would probably take that time frame probably 3 times as long, because we just don't have the staff and the manpower to do something like that. So that's why that third party contract process is set up, so it'll help expedite the review. And I use that term expedite kind of loosely. And for this particular project, we went for EIS. We have a contract called a processing agreement, which I'm assuming everybody knows about the processing agreement. You're new, okay. So the processing agreement, when we make the determination that an EIS is is required, and which triggers a third-party contractor. There's a processing agreement that is kind of a legal binding agreement that kind of outlines the roles and responsibilities for the third-party contractor, as well as the town, as well as any subcontractors. So it kind of outlines, I won't call them boundaries, but there are some boundaries where a third-party contractor can't start negotiating with the town because they're working basically again for us. So it kind of, it builds a kind of a barrier between the contractor and the town, because what you don't want is the third-party contractor having a lot of interaction with the applicant, and they write the document and people on the outside is like, well, the town contractor wrote the document and they had a lot of interaction, so it's not really, the perception may not be, it might be biased.
So what you're trying to stop ex parte communications, is that basically what it is?
Yeah, well, some communication and some duties.
Like a Chinese wall.
Yeah, right. So, okay, so you don't want the third-party contractor having a financial stake at when the permit decision's made. It's all right if a permit decision is made and it's favorable to the applicant, say, okay, we're authorizing you to do what you want to do. And then the town go back to that third party and do a separate contract to do monitoring or something like that. That's fine. But to set those contracts up before we've even made a permit decision, that leads down to a biased route. So that's that processing agreement. Took a while, but there was, we got through it, and that was signed, I'm not really sure when that was signed, November, I think, of last year. So that, by that threshold, that kind of shoots us up into really kind of getting into the EIS process. Then you get into what we call scoping. So the core, this is our fifth or fourth terminal growing EIS. So we kind of have an idea of what the relevant issues are, but that doesn't mean we know what all the relevant issues are. This is y'all's backyard. I mean, there's commercial fishermen that use the inlet. We don't know to what extent the importance of that inlet is to the local community. So what the scoping does, it allows us to bring in the public, not just the applicant and who they want to bring in, but we reach out to nonprofit groups, environmental groups, realtor groups, homeowners, commercial fishermen, the military, anybody who has a stake at what you guys are proposing in the inlet, they should have a say-so, because you're using public waters to do what you want to do. So they have the right to those public waters as well. So there is that aspect, and that's what scoping allows us to do, is reach out to the public and any groups and say, okay, what do you think the relevant issues are associated with this project? We have recently, we're kind of toying with when to start the scoping, and then this all stuff kind of fell in. So, but we did meet with Dow Cordy, the third party contractor, actually met in a picnic table in the park outside. So it was
6 feet apart.
6 feet apart. So we kind of went through the document, the outline of the document, what should be in the document. Because I know if some of you have been around when we did the EIS for the inlet management, and you saw how thick that was. So getting the document right is very key. So we sat down with Rolf, with Dow Cordy. We kind of went through the table of contents and what should be in the document. So they have drafted, put a draft of the document together. So what that means is, once we start the scoping and reaching out to the public and getting feedback from the public, and we know what some of the resource issues are or the relevant issues are, then we'll take those issues and put those in the document and address them. whether they're detrimental or beneficial or whatever, whatever the impacts are, good or bad, they will be addressed in the document. Now, some issues pop up and it's like, well, that's not really relevant. So we have to make that decision. And sometimes we have to eliminate different issues that are brought up because they're not relevant, but we have to explain that. So again, we're in terms of where we are today, I hope within the next 2 months, we'll start our first public scoping meeting. We're trying to figure out how to do that. Generally, it's hard for us to predict how many people will show up. Sometimes you get 10 or 20, and out of those 20, 15 are town members and contractors and stuff like that. Sometimes it could be 75. So a lot of times we'll have those in like a school or something, and then we break out into little groups, and each group will tell us what you want to see in the document. And then that way it gives the public involvement on the process and what goes in the document, what's important to them. So we're hopefully to do that again in the next 2 months. Trying to figure out, I see some of our sister districts have done one virtual, and I think somebody even broke into the presentation while it was going on. So there's good and bad with both. I think if the space is probably big enough, we might do it live. So y'all, and I'll be reaching out to David for some input on that, because he's got the feel, y'all have the feel of your citizens here. So, we'll be looking to David and say, what do you think? And try to get some input from the town. So let me go back to the EIS and kind of where we, just kind of outline where we are, but just to let everybody know what the steps are. So the EIS is basically a disclosure document. It addresses anything and everything, any kind of impacts or benefits that the project may potentially have. So it discloses, it breaks down all the alternatives and how each alternative will have an effect on various resources that we'll be looking at. It doesn't compare those in a sense. It doesn't say alternative A is better than B, B is better than C kind of thing. It just basically will take, just for example, we'll just say pipe and plover since it's critical habitat. So we'll go through each alternative and determine what the impacts are on pipe and plover for each one of those alternatives. So it allows us to do
Is one of the alternatives to nothing?
that is always the alternative, yep. By law, we have to have a no action alternative.
But still show the impact of it.
Correct, yeah, absolutely, because it may not have, sometimes no actions may have more detrimental impacts than to do something. I'm not saying that here, but there are those cases. And I will, speaking on that, I will say no action. That doesn't mean not to do anything at all. Sometimes the way the regs are written for EIS is a no action can be maintaining it as you are doing today. So you have a current permit, 50-year permit, I think it expires in 42 or something like that, 2042 or something like that, to manage the inlet right now. So a no action could be defined as managing the inlet as you're doing it today. Sometimes you could say no action could be no federal involvement whatsoever, but that's in this situation not realistic because you have an existing permit. So that will be a key role in our review here. So going to the EIS, when I say the scoping meeting in the next 2 months, we'll prepare what we call a notice of intent, or you'll see NOI. That's basically has to go in the Federal Register and basically advertising that we are reviewing the North Topsail Beach Terminal Growing Shoreline Protection / Navigation Project under the EIS process. And it'll have advertised when we have our first scoping meeting. So we'll do the scoping meeting, and once we get all the input from everybody, we'll finalize the draft EIS. The draft EIS will go out, it'll go into the Federal Register again, and it'll go on a 45-day review, so anybody and everybody can comment on the document. Once we get those all those comments, we'll be looking to Dial 40 to compile all those comments together, and we'll have to address each one of them. Whether if we say this doesn't apply, we're going to be explaining why it doesn't apply. So we're going to be 100% transparent, and we're going to disclose good, bad, ugly, pretty, whatever. So that's what that document does. Once we get all those comments and address them, then we'll move forward to preparing for the final EIS. And when the final EIS is ready to go out, that's when the town will actually apply for a permit to do the work. And you'll simultaneously apply for your CAMA permit as well. Coastal management didn't, in the past, they had a lot more involvement in the writing of the document. But they have a more loose FOIA, so people can get information from them as we're drafting documents. So people can get a document that we're currently working on, they can get copies of that, and they're not really final, so it causes problems. So we do a lot of the writing internally, and we'll provide DCM with a copy ahead of time when we're ready for it to go out. Let's see. I will mention this. This is a key component. The Trump administration, they signed an executive order, it may have been two years ago. It's called One Federal Decision. Basically, One Federal Decision states that anytime there is a federal authorization required and another federal authorization required, those two agencies come together, and if it's an EIS, and they have to prepare and finalize that EIS in 2 years. So there's a strict time frame with that one federal decision. And that one federal decision is for infrastructures. And we do have questions whether this really kind of applies to the one federal decision, because there's some language in that that can be taken either way. But the Council of Environmental Quality will make that decision. But I say all that because that 2-year period starts when that notice of intent is released. And doing a EIS in 2 years is, I won't say it's impossible, but it's probably not practical. So you'll do a lot of front end fact finding and putting together the document before you do your notice of intent, if we have to go through the one federal decision. Not trying to circumvent any of that, but just trying to be realistic in a time frame manner. Because I know you have Fran coming in. I think he's speaking. So he's probably going to give you an engineer update. So there'll probably, I won't say, there'll likely be some additional modeling that you may have to do. And that can be time consuming. So a lot of this fact finding and just compiling the EIS is just time consuming. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Can I ask one?
Yes, ma'am.
So the main question that I get is, when will it be done? And I don't think today that we can answer when will the project itself be done, but it sounds like, to set an expectation, we won't be out of the full EIS process probably for another 2.5 years
If you want to be,
or 3.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to
me,
be
right.
realistic so
Yeah,
people understand.
and I'm being recorded, so I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna give you a time frame. Because I've learned in the past that time frames are very hard to.
But it would, you don't imagine it would be done before that, I guess
really
is my,
don't.
right,
Not for terminal growings. I mean,
Right.
it's controversial to begin with.
right.
And just based on the last 3 that we've processed, and they just.
Well, and that's just, right, and then you have anybody who wants to have their public, I mean, the public comments, I would imagine, can take a while too, if you have a group or agency that is not for the terminal growing, and then.
Sure, yeah, I mean,
You can appeal the permits, right?
pardon me?
You can appeal the permits.
Y'all can.
I'm saying anybody can. If you don't like what was issued, I'm assuming there's an appeal. I mean, that's what's going into a lot of drilling and stuff is.
There's no, I don't think there's third party appeal. They could take you to court, but they can't.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
Injunction.
correct. And that kind of goes into the Ocean Isle litigation.
Right.
And that's why getting the EIS is right, getting it full and complete. Not to say that we're not a proponent or opponent of this project. We just review it as it is. So we don't take a stand whether it's good or bad. So when we write our document, we're just looking at, okay, are we addressing the right thing? And are we adequately addressing it and fully addressing it based on the laws that we have? Now, if somebody wants to sue us based on the law, then that's fine. But we're more keyed up on making sure we're abiding by the law.
So you're not prejudging the solution.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, your personality is like, I don't know what this is, I mean, but you're
But
You're
just a
not.
question for you to actually put you on the spot. So if, let's just assume you were sitting here and you're saying, okay, I've got to budget for this. The real money. I'm not
Right.
talking about permits and everything else. Okay, and you wanted to have money in the pocket, even if it takes 3 to 4 years before you can get a permit. You're talking 4 or 5 years probably before, I mean, I'm aggressively to start work on something like that, you are 4 to 5 years out minimum. Is that a reasonable assumption?
We're working on a capital.
Yeah,
Yeah, working on a 5-year
Right,
capital
right.
budget, and we'd like to know what the numbers are, you know?
It depends on how aggressive y'all are in terms of, okay, we're going to get it, and if information is requested and that information, and you're jumping on it and trying to get that, whatever we're asking for addressed real quickly. Again, sometimes if there's a additional modeling and y'all have to wait to get approval or money appropriated in 4 months, 6 months goes by. I mean, if you're really aggressive in terms of appropriating money and just Johnny on the spot every single time, there might be a permit decision by then.
But again,
But it might.
Your experience, well, one is you don't even know what the permit's gonna be, so we
Right.
get a permit that we don't want.
Right. I was just about to say, it may not be a permit decision in your.
All right, we have
Yeah.
Tom's
Yes,
got a
sir.
question.
Jenny, you referenced the 3 other terminal growings.
Yes, sir.
And each one of those, I assume, also had an EIS.
Correct.
And just for the purpose of maybe giving us some context, can you give us an idea of how long it took cradle to grave for those EISs to
Right.
be completed?
Well, if you want the ideal cradle to grave fast track, you have to look at Ball Head Island. Because I mean, they were trying to plan it when the Corps was doing a dredging project to get the material placed on there. So they were pretty much Johnny on the spot, and I wish I could tell you how long that took, but I think it was less than 3 years, I'm pretty sure.
What about the others?
Well, there's
Not
always,
Ocean Isle,
the applicant always
Yeah.
adds something in there, and it like, I don't have town approval, or I have to go up for a vote, or I need easements. And the Ocean Isle, I wish I could tell you how fast that one went, but it's still in litigation.
Right.
The Department of Justice has it, and it's up in the Fourth Circuit.
Because, Bald Head was kind of a perfect storm.
Right.
And Bald Head was able to cut some corners, and they've got a lot of real well-heeled people that own homes there. And that's not gonna be more Townsville beaches.
Right, right.
So-
And that's why I'd say every situation is different, and if y'all were Johnny on the spot like a Bald Head, and everything was adequately addressed. But like you said, permit decision, again, we're not opponents or proponents.
Right.
It might not be in your favor. So I don't want to make anybody allude to the fact that we're all for the terminal growing and we think it's perfect. Because there are issues with alternatives with your inlet management and how the terminal growing fits into that. So we've had discussions with Fran and your previous folks, as well as Dow Cordy, in terms of what kind of alternatives that need to be looked at. And that's part of our scoping. When we go through the scoping process, somebody say, well, what about this alternative? And we're like, yeah, why won't that work? Kind of thing. Yes, sir.
We can tell you that when you're digging a wide, deep trench in the inlet and putting the sand on the beach next to it, that won't work. We tried that one.
Yeah.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
I'm Mark Benson.
Yes, sir.
Coming back to the scoping meeting you were describing earlier, it seems like, of course, with the virus, it's difficult to have large groups. But it seems like from what you described about the nature of the scoping meeting, that it's a facilitated meeting. You break up in small groups and so forth. And so you end up with, in your scoping document, you end up with a consensus of the comments that were made, all the comments that were made that go into the scoping document. So my question is, rather than having an in-person meeting, why not have a two-phase scoping meeting? Phase one, all the stakeholders write a position paper about what they see as the issues, so forth and so on, just like they would do if they were in the room with you. And then you collate all those, they go back to everyone, and then you have, I guess you'd have to have maybe a virtual meeting for everyone to hear the comments that in response to what you had initially, but at least you're going to end up with something written in the end anyway, so why not just ask for that to begin with?
Yeah, and I fully understand what you're saying. In these scoping meetings, they're almost like bullets fashion. They're like, you'll have, and we're talking usually smaller groups of 6 to 8 people in each room, because you're not going to get some people speaking out in a bigger group. So we found it being efficient and people are more willing to speak out. And they'll just say, I want to study on birds, or I want to study on the costs of it, and where's the money coming from. And it's interesting when you might have 10 different groups, and when you compile all the bullets, there usually comes up 4 or 5 issues. So to go to your point, it would be hard for us to reach out to everybody, and because they won't know how to comment on something when they don't know all the parts of the project, maybe.
So you put that out ahead of time, the parts of the project before the.
Well, we do that during the scoping meeting. We'll have the contractor, and in this case, it would be Fran, to stand up, and he'll give a rundown of the project. And he'll kind of explain, this is what the town's proposing, and there'll be displays of where the growing's going to go, and give a chance to people, consume that. And then when we get in the group, then that's when they say, well, I'd like for you to do this, look at this issue, whether it's passage for shrimp boats or whatever it is.
So you could have Fran give that meeting as a virtual webinar.
Potentially.
Then you could have the stakeholders respond to it in writing. Then you could summarize it in your scoping document. And then you could come back to the stakeholders with, these are all the things that we found
Right.
in the
that we feel are relevant that need to be
And
addressed
you
in
see
the
anything that we've left out that you said you would like to see?
right. I'd say we've thought about, there's goods and bads to each of them.
But I think at the end of the day, we need to follow whatever process they identify as how they're.
But y'all are part of this too, so I mean, we don't.
Yeah, but I think what Mike was suggesting is what I would call the COVID option, which is,
Right.
how are you gonna get everybody in a room and have 5 or 6 people 6 feet apart do what you want to do?
Right.
And you got, 50 people there, when we don't even have in here, we don't even have our citizens come in.
Right.
I mean, that could.
Well, that's why we usually have them at schools, and we have a big auditorium, and then we break into like school
You're in a
classrooms.
stadium.
Yeah,
You have everybody
but you'd be
6 feet apart.
surprised. I mean, if you only have 50 people, that's not a lot. I mean, you look in here, we probably got 25. So our experience in the past is we don't get huge turnouts for those.
And COVID there might be other,
But-
less requirements.
Right.
Yeah, less restrictions.
Well, and you gotta think about, not everybody has access to internet. Not everybody has a computer or a laptop. Not everybody knows how to go to a web meeting. I mean,
That's true.
you have to be in the business world to really know that stuff, especially web meetings and how to operate
Or
that.
be under 20.
Yeah, or 20, right.
And you think of the fishermen, they're not.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, there's all these factors that we're like, well, and we might find we do one and it might not turn out good. And we say, well, we need to do it again, and we do it virtually. We've talked about a 2-phase kind of thing. Maybe have a limit of, okay, we'll set the limit at 30 people. First 30 can come at date, October 1st. The next meeting we'll have a follow-up for all those who couldn't make it. Then we'll have it on October 15th, something like that.
You just want to be creative, is what you're saying.
Sure, and our biggest point is we have to get opportunity to everybody to comment on it. We do not want to leave anybody out. We don't want to have people, a group says, well, we didn't know about it, or we couldn't access it, whatever that case is. So we're trying to be creative and open and all the above.
Mickey, if I may.
Yes, sir.
All this process is highly dictated by federal legislation and regulations.
If we go to the one federal decision, it certainly is,
Well,
more so, but.
My point is, I think Baldhead didn't get sued, did they?
They did not.
Okay.
They didn't go
But
into
the farther you vary from the norm, the more likely opponents to whatever is selected will be enticed to bring additional suits. So what we want to do is keep it as traditional, historical, as we've done it as possible, and be as inclusive as possible. You don't want to go through this process and then some interest group say, well, we didn't know, we didn't have the accurate information in time, we couldn't provide meaningful input, and then they say, great, send it all the way back and start over again.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's why it's laid out as it is. The draft goes out, has a 45-day commenting period. You have a scoping meeting, it has a 30-day commenting period. We do the final, it has a 30-day. So, and we advertise that in the Federal Register. We put it in the papers. We will send it to the town and say, if you could put this on your website. We put it on our website. So for somebody to say, I didn't know, they probably didn't have a strong interest in in what was going on to begin with. I mean, obviously that can happen. Because a lot of things happen that we don't.
I'm just saying that historically it's in person.
Right.
And then we vary from that significantly because of COVID, whatever.
Right.
That's low hanging fruit for someone to bring a suit.
Well, it's something, and I hate to use this term because I despise it, but it's kind of become the new normal. I mean, we just had last month a day where we had virtual meetings on Capitol Hill, okay? And so some things are having to change based upon the current situation with the COVID virus. And they're gonna have to be some things that they're gonna be modified in terms of how business is going. This might be one.
The General Assembly of North Carolina has done a great job passing new legislation to accommodate that, where we are.
Right.
I haven't looked into the federal regs as to the EIS process to see if there's any new legislation.
There's not that I know
I
of.
mean, I normally would get something like that on one of
Yeah, I
those.
just, I hear what you're saying, Brian, but I also see what's going on around us.
Right.
And what's going on around us is modifications being made to the traditional way of doing lots of things that are accommodating the situation with social distancing and the virus and stuff. And, we need, I think we need to look at it from both sides, is all I'm saying.
I'm 100% with you, but I know in North Carolina, originally you had to, give you an example in the court system. Originally, you had to consent to a WebEx oral argument in the Court of Appeals of the North Carolina Supreme Court. Now you don't. The North Carolina Supreme Court had its first oral argument, virtual oral argument, I think June 16th.
Okay.
Next Tuesday, we have a hearing in Brunswick County that we didn't have a choice. It's going to be a WebEx hearing. 2 months ago, it was you had to consent to that type of thing. Again, I haven't looked into the federal statutes to see if they made similar accommodations, but I would much rather find as large a venue as we can have, and if it's overflowing, then we know we need a bigger venue, at least try, than go completely from in-person to completely remote. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that in the end, what I think 3-4 years from now, we look back on this, there's going to be some sort of a hybrid. There's going to be a blend to this where we're going to have a physical meeting someplace. We're also going to have a virtual component to that physical meeting to accommodate those who either can or don't want to, or they're at risk, or are at risk.
So I think from here, what we need to do is just a way to follow up, and whether that follow-up comes from Mr. Gilbride or Fran, I'm not exactly sure, but just on how you all decide to move forward with the scoping meetings and when they'll be.
And we'll check with state law in terms of gathering and size limits and things like that. Because we're basically operating on how the state's telling us to operate in our office, district office. So
we're essential. So you and I can talk offline about that.
Right.
Well, I think the takeaway is that pretty much everybody in the room is in agreement that we don't want to see this get slowed down over issues with meetings.
Oh, yeah, I think
meetings.
everybody agrees with that.
I just want it to be said for the record that that everyone, I think is, I'll speak for myself, I'm in agreement with that. The fact that we don't want to see the process slow down any more than necessary over the fact that we've got issues relative to meetings and COVID.
Well, we're going to find the largest venue PA system if we need to, but I'd much rather say, okay, only 20 people showed up. So we know we don't need this massive auditorium or whatever, then do something completely out of the box, even though it's justifiable. But until the laws change, I don't want to give someone an easy argument. I know Tyler Rossler defending the Ocean House. I mean, I followed that case. They are in the Fourth Circuit. They won at the trial level, but there are groups out there that are tenacious.
Well, to that point, they're going to be tenacious no matter how we proceed. But you're right, we don't want to give them any additional ammunition.
Right.
Right, I think everybody's in agreement. We're saying the same thing. We're just.
The scoping meeting we had for the inlet management EIS, that was at Dixon High School.
I was just thinking the new middle school or the high school or something like that. Okay.
But we can certainly, we'll do some more internal discussion and reach out to other districts. I was thinking it was Savannah maybe who did the virtual one, and just kind of get some feedback on, how it worked for them.
Okay.
Like I say, if it doesn't work, then we'll do another one the other way.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to say, well, we only had 20 people. That's because we met personally, because you may have only had 20 to begin with before COVID.
But you might have 10 that say, I didn't want to go to the in-person meeting. Okay, so I didn't get to, I mean, that's the point, that you got to lay it out, because you're going to have people argue process.
Right.
Okay, I didn't go because I'm at risk, I'm over this age, I couldn't go, you didn't let me come virtually, I couldn't come in person. I mean, it's a circle.
Yeah, and we may put a statement in there, it's like, if you prefer virtual over, please let us know. And at least we can kind of get a tick of how many people may want to do the virtual versus in person. That's,
Okay.
I am good to hire. If you want to come in person, great. If not, you can participate.
at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Anything else, Nikki?
No, ma'am, just thank you for letting me come and, you know, you can call me at any time if you have questions. And I would just throw a recommendation out. You know, if you want to call me once a month and just say, you know, where are we? You know, if you need updates, you know, feel free to call. My number's always there. So if you ever have any further, sure.
All right, thank you so much.
And you can do a FOIA request because there's a lot of information if you want to know it. Yeah. At some point, you may want to do that if you want to know what the file is and, you know, from beginning to end. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir, very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
y'all.
Thank you, Nikki.
Appreciate that.
Okay. So the next on the agenda is Mr. Carter from DEC Associates. Do we have him?
Let me see if he's out.
There he is. Yep, he's there.
There he is.
Oh, I thought he was coming.
Mm-mm.
Hey, Doug, sorry.
SpaceX. We get two Carters.
Yeah. Hi, how are you, sir?
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear us, Doug and Andrew?
We can.
That's good.
Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Welcome to the meeting.
Well, thank you.
And I believe that you are presenting to us, or are you just answering questions tonight?
Well, Madam Mayor and members of the Board of Aldermen, we're here to do what you would like us to do. So we're at your beck and call.
And I think what we wanted to do from a board perspective is just kind of baseline from an educational background where we are right now. So I know that you assisted the town a few years back. And we really just kind of wanted to pick your brain about that and then see how we can start to engage you moving forward as we start to plan for some additional capital improvement projects that we've got.
Perfect. Well, let me say this. I'm here with Andrew Carter, who's a principal in this firm, and we have been the work team that's worked with the town since we began, I believe, in 2012. And we worked officially through contract on the 2012 financing, and again on the 2014 financing for the larger project. And basically, as a matter of background, both of those financings were accompanied by a report to the town council. We made numerous in-person meetings. There was an adopted financial model that occurred with each of those financings, which demonstrated the financial ability to pay for those. And then one of the things that's probably somewhat unusual, for lack of a better term, is the town in 2014 executed an agreement with the North Carolina Local Government Commission in terms of how the beach fund was to be operated as a means to retire the 30-year financing that you had with the USDA. And so essentially, as we see our work with you guys, where we contract to do that, is first to look at the beach fund, to look back at the former models that were prepared and submitted, to look at the circumstances of the beach fund today, to determine where we are with that, and then look at how that agreement with the Local Government Commission influences how you would move forward with other beach nourishment projects. And then secondarily, and this would all be going on simultaneously, we would look at the general improvement needs. As an example, the fire station, how you would finance that, how many years you could finance it over, what is the cost of that, how does that get blended into the current town budget, things of that nature. And then finally, we would prepare financial models for you that would show how all of this would work inside your financial planning and budgetary framework.
Well, that sounds perfect.
Mr. Carter, Rick Grant, I'm one of the new aldermen, and he'll tell you, I live by numbers. When you're modeling this thing out, Alderman Betts and I are trying to put together something looking like at a 5-year capital type needs. And you talked about models that you've built. Are you or will you put together what I'm going to call a comprehensive type of thing? So that if we come back to you and say, you're going to have some hard assets that are probably going to be easier to finance than sand. You're going to have different, like what is the borrowing capabilities of the town? What, you're going to be forecasting revenues, all those type of things. So that as we're looking at this, it comes back to us, it's the old, the old joke is, what do you mean I'm out of money? I still got checks. Okay. We need to know how much money we're going to have as a town. Okay. What we can spend where.
Yes.
And then come back and try to figure out with your help what the priorities of the town are and what we're able to take on, because it's, I think the view in general is you can't finance everything, right? And so we need to figure out what that overlap is going to be between projects. If we've got something that's rolling out after 5 years, maybe we can do something. It's not just the firehouse, but apparently we're going to need new engines and other things as well. And I think, that would be very helpful to us. I think, at least to me, to be able to get a view of, this is how much money you guys, you as aldermen, have that you can spend. All right, here's the way you could finance those things, and to be honest with us, and tell us certain things you're not going to be able to finance, or what the process we would have to go through to get approval to get financing.
Exactly. That's exactly the process. That's what we showed town council in earlier years. So that's exactly what the process is. In fact, in earlier years, that is what created the need to raise taxes for the beach nourishment projects years ago.
Good, thank you.
And then just for clarification, because we do have new board members here as well as new staff members. The 2014, I think that was phase 5. Would that be?
That's correct.
That's for, and then 2012 finance, was that phase 1 or was
Yes,
that something else?
phase 1.
Okay.
That's correct. That's correct.
I think the only board member that was on the board for 12 and 15 or 14 was me. Dick was on for 14. I think I was the only one who's still here that was on the board for the 2012.
So it sounds like we've never gone through, and this is just an observation, but it sounds like we've never gone through this budgeting process for capital improvements such as the fire station or expanding the police department or anything like that. It's been just beach related, correct?
It was for those, it was for the large projects.
Beach related, just, but
No.
only just beach related, right? Or no?
Yeah, but at the same time, about a year ago or a little over a year ago, we started talking about that, and it was suggested to the manager at the time to coordinate and contact the Carters
Yes.
and DEG for exactly the reasons we're talking about here. Figure out, it's kind of like qualifying for a mortgage,
Exactly.
what have I got coming in? What have I got going out every month? What have I got that'll be paid off? And not just, the idea was not just for beach projects, but for the entire well-being of all the things that we need, the firehouse, the fire engines, and all of that stuff. So we've been kicking this around for over a year.
I agree.
And I think, the other thing that's important too is we need to know where the elephants are. If we've got a bump where we've got $1 million we've got to spend on a fire truck, all right, and you come back to us and say, look, under these financing models, you're not going to be able to finance that because you don't have the revenues behind it. It might be a good asset. Then I think that part of our planning should be, if we know we've got an elephant in 3 years, then we need to start putting away the money for the elephant today. That not look to finance everything, but what kind of reserves we should build up. And I think we'd look to you guys to kind of help us. To me, that's just how you run a business, right? It's
That's
not
exactly
every
right.
year. It's not a new world.
That's exactly right.
and figure out what the future is.
Yes. As I see it, there would be a financial plan for the beach fund because that's its own unique entity. And there are some circumstances in the agreement you have with the local government commission that control your expenditure out of the beach fund. But you also need, and we never worked on this because it was not at that time a work plan to do that while we were working on the earlier financings. But at the same time, we would look at the general government, its financial plan and need, and the models would look at your assumed needs, the time period for those needs, the cost for those needs as projected, and how we would pay for them. And you're
That would be a living model, you know, basically because, you know, the difference between estimates and actuals, right?
exactly.
You do a 5-year rolling budget, you know, the 5th year never really becomes actuals. And so I think we need to have something that's a living model that we can use, I think, going forward. At least I think we do.
Well, that's exactly what this is. In fact, as some of you may know, we're financial advisor to the county of Onslow, and they've used a multi-year financial planning process for way more than a decade. And so what we do and assist them is the same thing would be with you at the budget time, at least, and other times in the interim, if you needed it, we would meet with you, look at the model, look at how it might have changed based upon actual circumstances, where revenues were, things of that nature. So it is in fact a living document. That's well stated.
So I think that that's exactly what we as a board, I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
I just had a question. I'm new to the board as well. Do you look at other revenue streams like grants and things like that? Do you include areas where we could get money from another source besides borrowing and raising taxes?
Well, we certainly would. I'm sorry.
Or is that not something that's part of what you're doing? That would be something that we would do on our own, look for other.
Well, we would essentially be a partner with you, but not really your grant ombudsman, as they're called. We wouldn't not be with the ones that would look for the grants, but we would work together with town management as they did those processes to say how would it affect the model if we in fact got those grants. But we don't provide the grant services.
So they don't provide a rock turning over service to find money in other places.
Well, I didn't know if maybe they knew of things because they're advisors to other towns.
Very good
So,
point, because, you know, Susan, to your point, they might come back and say, look, you're gonna have to find third-party money.
right.
Okay, this project works if you can raise through whatever fund another X.
Mhm.
So I think it's a really good way to look at it.
So I think at this,
And we would be willing to do that without question. And we would share with you everything that we do. We work with a number of other beach towns on their nourishment and general financial planning. And so we would share with you across the board what seems to be available.
and then where we left it at the last special meeting was we had given direction to Mr. Gilbride to go ahead and move forward with getting the contract reviewed and executed for us to be able to move forward down this path. Where I don't know where that stands right now.
I was waiting on this meeting.
Okay,
I'll
so,
have that to tomorrow if you'd like.
okay.
It's 2 pages, so, Brian.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys. Any other questions?
Awesome.
We
No,
appreciate you attending virtually for us.
Thank you.
To be there.
Of course. See y'all again.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manager, we'll talk tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. And if
Julie?
Deb, yes, sir.
I was gonna say, could you introduce the folks from the Corps of Engineers here with the?
Yep, I was thinking, that, yes,
Yeah.
certainly. Would you mind standing up and introducing yourselves? I'm sorry about that.
My name is Bob Keisha. I'm with the Wilmington District Civil Works Program Project Management Branch. So Mickey talked about Colonel Bennett has a regulatory side. I'm on the Civil Works side. Pam Caston is a project manager that y'all recognized her face over the last decade. And Colonel Bennett, she's been a deputy
ever since she got out of high school.
And it didn't change, right?
And Colonel Bennett is our new commander here. He's been here, started, about a month ago.
Yeah, so,
From where?
I've been around a lot of places. I just moved from Pennsylvania. I was in a war college up there for a year. I was in Tampa before that, CENTCOM. So, been in the Army about 23 years. This is my second assignment with the Corps. I was in the Savannah District for a while. Kind of had your traditional combat engineer background, but this is kind of a normal path. This is my third assignment in North Carolina, so we feel connected. I went to school in South Carolina, so.
Where'd you go?
Undergrad at the Citadel Graduate School of Clemson. So happy to be here. Hey, you all are very important partners to us, obviously. My daughter's played at your beach already plenty of times. So really, we're here to answer any questions you have. Make sure you understand how we are a part of the process from the regulatory standpoint, from the coastal storm risk management process, what that works, what that means, what we can do for you. Again, I won't answer any of your questions. They will, because I'm kind of learning some of it myself, but I really just want you to know this is important to us, and we're here to support you in any way we can.
And we appreciate you coming, and I'm sorry I didn't have you guys introduce yourselves earlier. I thought we were going to do that with part of the Fran way, because he's more of the overarching. You can.
Uniform since he was 18.
Yeah, that's right.
And just so everybody in the room knows, these are the folks who are working so hard on the federal project for us, getting all the information turned around and our questions answered and trying to get those pencils sharpened
We're here to
slightly.
support you the best we can. So, and again, I know they work hard every single day. They're the smart ones. But if you need something, let us know. And if we can't answer, we'll get you in the right direction.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, Fran Way, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Does everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
They can hear you. We're not, the audio is going to YouTube, but we've lost the camera part. So, I'll try to work on that to reconnect us, but right now, I think, they may still be able to hear us. I don't know if we've just got a lot of equipment on this, public wireless.
We want to check.
Do you want to break or do you want us to keep going?
No, you can
Well,
keep
if
going.
we're not getting audio and video, let's take
Take a
recess.
Fran, we're going to take a 5-minute break and see if we can figure out this.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
Thanks,
5 minutes. Yep.
I mean, as long as the audio is streaming, I think we're try to figure it out.
What are we trying to figure out?
It's not, the video is not streaming.
Okay, I can't hear, I couldn't hear
Oh, you couldn't hear?
Mr. Carter there at all,
Well, you didn't have your headphones on?
but I put them on.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
And you couldn't hear?
I could barely hear him too, but that was the volume in here. That's not got to do with this other issue.
It just didn't come through the headphones, it didn't come through the speaker.
So we recess.
Actually, Deb,
You couldn't hear it. It just wasn't loud, so it wasn't just your headphones, it was.
It seemed like he kind of inclined away from his speaker.
Fran, we're in recess, if you can hear me.
Taking a break.
Start out as a tracker for the legislation that's entitled to
Yeah. He's retired. Lives on Folly Beach, so he's also 3 years.
Okay, when you must have graduated, said it all in court.
90, well.
Deb, I am upset.
96, but I graduated in 97.
That's what I was saying.
Most of my buddies were.
I thought so. That's what we're saying.
Good friend, a couple of friends of mine. In fact, one of them was from Charleston.
Oh, really?
Are we going to make our 8 o'clock?
We are. We're going to talk fast.
Oh, gosh. Very fast.
Very fast.
He and I got back. I thought you were there. So at the end, I backed down. I said, So then we'll, that's what we'll say. I understand my background. I was.
You were?
Oh,
Looks like it's back.
Yeah, we got the back.
Guys have fun together. Kind of exciting, kind of.
Hey, Fran, how's that?
It's good. Yeah, you're good.
Excellent, thank
Well,
you.
it may have even been more interesting if you were home.
I'm still.
Mayor,
Okay.
come back up.
Okay, guys. you're back.
I see, okay.
Guys, can we rejoin? We are back on. Okay. Fran, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right, I'm getting everybody trying to get seated back down here. I think we're ready for you. If you just, are you just giving us an update tonight, sir?
Yes. And for the truck haul project, we're still permitting with the state Department of Coastal Management, DCM. We sent them some the latest survey data of the beach, which was in July. On July 22nd, we had the pre-bid meeting for the dune haul project for the northern shoreline. It was well attended. Scott, the Department of Public Works, he was there with me, and we had about 16 people attend, contractors. That deadline was extended. We extended it because of the hurricane, and that the bids will be due on August 11th. And then I'm still working on that bar area A for the Florence category G project. That's still moving forward. And then recently with Hurricane Isaias, Bob Glasson with FEMA, he's already contacted me about losses and damages. And I said the town was, collecting survey data, and we were going to quantify that, and we would get to FEMA with that survey data. We also kind of need the survey in there in terms of if, God forbid, another hurricane hit, FEMA likes to be able to quantify the difference between each hurricane in terms of losses and erosion and attribute just the losses to that specific hurricane. So and that's pretty much where we are. And then that's, I listened to the entire Mickey's entire talk, and we can kind of follow up later on some of that. And that's kind of my update for now.
Do we have any questions for Fran? Mr. Benson?
Fran, a couple questions. First question is about the truck haul project and the category B. Are we going to be able to get either a change order or a modified permit so that we can use that additional state money with the federal money to extend the scope of the truck haul project?
And you would like to extend the truck haul project all the way to the inlet, is that correct? Or are you just talking about increasing the volumes like per cubic foot, like making it a beefier dune?
Yeah, well, whichever is going to be the most, provide the most shoreline protection. We do have that.
We have in terms of the permitting, we have included kind of a beefier dune where, and if we need to place less material because of funding limitations, we will, but we are kind of trying to permit the biggest dune we can. And DCM actually has, so they don't want us to, put a whole bunch of dune and minimize the amount of beach for walking and recreating. So we're kind of, they want the dune to be rebuilt, but they also have to ensure that the beach is still very recreational, even in a spring high tide.
Okay, and the other question I had was the category G project. Is the discussion back and forth with the Army Corps over the Barrow area, is that one of the main hangups with getting the bid package ready for that project? And
yes, yeah, I mean, I think,
are we going to be able to do that project in this dredge season?
no, it was as soon as we had that meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA and Department of DCM and Wildlife Resource Conservation, or WRC. Basically we have the permits. We wanted to use the North Topsail Beach as offshore bar area and kind of get that going. And they were adamant that we couldn't, even though there is material left since the 2015 project, the issue of rocks, they were like, no, you cannot use this site again. And so then we have to go back to the drawing board, and we're looking at bar area A, which is farther to the south, and that will require the full-on permit. Basically, the town still has that, the permit that Mickey mentioned that's good till 2042, but that is really only for the channel realignment, and that 600 or 700,000 cubic yards of sand every 5 years, and that's really the only thing. So this would have to be a separate permit, and then through the Corps and through DCM, it's going to take at least a year.
So Fran, can I ask one question just so we can give the residents like a visual? So the truck haul project for Hurricane Florence, is that going to cover pretty much where this last one ended, and then how far north?
Yes, it's going to pick up right where the last one ended.
Like St. Moritz area, I think.
Yes, and it's going up to the edge of Topsail Reef Villas. Okay. And basically north of Topsail Reef Villas, there's no place we can put a dune. We have to put it into the water, and that's a completely different permitting process.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Fran?
Are we still on for the dredge in the fall for the sand going on North Topsail, on the beach from the inlet?
Yes, actually, that would be a great question for Bob Kiesler. He's a navigation guy, and I don't, but he's right there. He knows
he's not
all
passing
that.
the buck or anything to you.
Your question is not his dredge, but our dredge.
Yes, sir, it's your dredge.
Okay, so we awarded a contract last year to do, it was, remember, it's O&M navigation project, and we put beach and paddle stand on adjacent beaches. And we're funded to get the New River Inlet Crossing and Channel to Jacksonville. Contractor has underperformed, and didn't finish all the work within the original environmental window. So we sent them home. They'll come back. They were ordered to come back in the fall and finish the work. And this is one of the last two locations that have to. I can get you more specific details on when they would come back and when they plan to come back.
They're coming here first, right?
I'll get back to you later.
He's good.
I'll tell you that underperforming has been nice. We have risen this contractor like they've been as poor of dredging contractors I've ever had in my career. So it's not that they can't do the work; it's the management, coordination, and time. So.
Herd
catch is a good example.
Remember the suggestion you got that the New River Inlet and the channel is the biggest part of the project remaining to be done. So as Alderman Leonard says, let's do that one first.
That's right.
So that you can get the smaller ones done as time allows.
I will take an action on this in the mayor, an email, send David, let you know the status, forecast test of time, and escalate quality of those times.
I appreciate that.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you. Okay, anything else? No?
Nope.
Thank you, Fran. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda. This would be Ms. Hill. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Hill, proposed amendment to allow garage apartment guest house. She's smiling. Hmm? What? Oh, hold on, wait a second, Deb. Yes.
Seeing as how they're here to address the further project, I know that people have had questions.
Well, the only reason I didn't bring, yep, that's the only reason I didn't bring up specific questions for the federal project because we didn't have an agenda item on here. So if it's allowable for me to bring up some of the general consensus or concerns that I've had, I'm happy to do so.
Motion to suspend the rules, if that passes, motion to add this to.
Okay,
I make a motion, we suspend the rules. Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and
Make a motion.
Add a discussion of the.
Add to the agenda the discussion of the Corps of Engineers federal project. Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, well, thank you so much, everybody. So, and again, thank you all for coming. And really I'm just gonna kind of summarize the questions or concerns that I've gotten, and they won't be new for you because I feel like we're continuing to work through them. So one was general questions and concerns on the PPA, which we met with Surf City, and that included Alderman Grant, your comments that you had mentioned as well. So those were all submitted down, and I know that you guys are working through responding to those. I haven't seen that come back yet, but I imagine that it'll take a little bit of time.
It will be shortly. We've actually drafted responses to those questions already, and they're undergoing review, in our office of counsel and such, just to make sure that when we get back to you, that's been fully coordinated. So
Perfect.
we should be able to get you those responses, within the next few days.
And then the other question that we get and that we're getting pressure from citizens on is just to be able to give the green light to start this project. And when we explain back, or when I explain back that we certainly would love to be able to move forward with the project, what we're trying to understand are the final numbers. Because I know that you all understand that we've got some concerns and budget constraints as far as the project has grown in size from a cost perspective from when it was originally planned years and years ago, and that you've been working really hard to try and help us with those figures, specifically as it relates to the renourishment efforts, because I think that's where a lot of the concerns are. And I don't believe we've gotten those final figures back yet. So it's really hard for us as a board to be able to approve or deny anything when we just don't have it in front.
We have updated the nourishment numbers. Those have changed from the original. I think it went from 893 to 672 on the nourishments. And that is an updated certified costs. So that is available in terms of our updated information. I think it's important to note, though, relative to the overall project costs, that as we move forward, we're working on some environmental documentation to take a look at the potential for year-round dredging and placement. All of that is going to hopefully help our numbers in an overall long-term sense. So ultimately, we're all kind of, I think, working towards the same goal, and that is to a streamlined, most efficient, project. The numbers we have right now are the numbers that we'll have to work with the PPA. And of course, as we move forward, if we can get those numbers more streamlined, then it's the streamlined numbers that will be, on the table.
Yes, sir.
I want to be the skunk of the picnic. I'm new to the process, okay?
I feel you.
Yeah. But when I look at it, I look at the numbers. I think it's a great project, but it's and don't laugh at this. When I look back at the original thing, it's nobody here's fault. Okay, we went into a car dealership to buy a car for $30,000, and then we went back and it's $130,000. Okay, and those are the numbers that we see. It's a small town. Okay, companies this is a nit in the companies that I used to run, but it's a big deal for this town, and that's why
had them take it on. And when I look at something like the renourishment, I was using that as an example. I don't know, is that absolutely cast in stone? We have to make that commitment. Because what we're looking at, again, my simple way of looking at this, we've got a 50-year commitment and we don't know how much it's going to cost. All right, by the stuff that you've seen, there's going to be an inflation piece on that. So if the town, if we see something that goes up 10% a year, and my wife happens to be an MBA CPA who has modeled this stuff for me, which helps, is when you start looking at what that looks like 20 years from now, right? Remember the rule of eights? Anything that goes up 8% doubles in 8 years. When you start looking at even those kind of little increases, and you look at the revenues this town has had for the last 10 or 15 years, money's not there. And so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, we talked about it a little bit, what are hard costs, what are soft costs? In the PPA, we've got things like the Corps can get back money from 2012, right? And it's not that you haven't worked on it, and I understand everybody tracks it and things like that, but what are hard costs, what are soft costs? What are things that, what can we afford is what it comes down to, because everybody loves the project. You guys have put together an incredible project, but if it's if I can't afford a Bentley, I got to buy what I can buy. And so I don't think there's any doubt that everybody here is very supportive of the project, but it's trying to figure out, are we even able to pay for it? And what type of resources? I mean, one of the things, and I've only been over there for a couple of months, one of the things that we just found out that has nothing to do with your project is we need a firehouse. And that's been kicked down the road for years. And you go out there and look at it, it's got to be replaced. That's millions. For a town whose total budget is for both $10 million, $10 million in revenue. We're taking on a project, and recognizing the federal government's taking a big piece of it, and the state is. But the little piece that we've got left will be the biggest financial undertaking that town's ever taken. And that's without the renourishment. When you add the renourishment to it, and it's like, again, just looking at it from a business standpoint, I am very concerned personally about taking on an unknown financial obligation, because we're trying to figure out how do you finance something when, what is it, every 5 years, right? That you've got to go under 6 years.
6 years.
How do I finance something? I can't finance something today because I can't go to the bank and say, I don't know what the cost is, but are you willing to lend me money 6 years from now?
But I think some of that too, Alderman Grant, goes to beach nourishment projects, because you're not expected that you're just putting sand on the beach one time. You are expected that you're going to be.
And those are things that I didn't understand
Yeah.
when I started looking at I looked at the base project and I'm like, well, it's markets. I'm not talking about the project. I think it's a wonderful project. My undergrad's in civil. I love this stuff. My grandfather was in the Corps. Okay. Father was Army. Love the project. And when you're looking at it, it's a stretch. But when you look at what the impact of the renourishment is in the financial of this town, it's a huge number for us. And it's basically an uncapped liability going forward, right? And somebody said, well, they'll bail us out. That's called receivership. I don't think anybody wants to be in receivership because we took it on. And so I guess what my thoughts on this thing is, I don't know what are hard costs, what are soft costs. I don't know what flexibility there is, those type of things. But we would love to work with you to figure out what the options are in something like that. But,
And that's also the reason that we're
right, and
hiring
that's
the
why we're
Carter
hiring.
group.
You heard the discussion with the partners. Is come back and tell us. If I'm using, if we can't build a firehouse because we've taken an obligation someplace else, is that the best thing for our citizens? And that's a tough one. Or like the fire chief has talked about, we've got new fire trucks we're gonna have to come up with. And
He wants something every meeting.
he told me he wanted an engine. I'm like, why are you buying an engine? He goes, okay. Remember when you were 5 years old, you got a fire engine? Yeah, so I remember that. But again, it's just, and I'm just looking straight at the numbers, not at the project.
Well,
You guys have done a wonderful job of putting this together. You really have. It's, without question, it's a beautiful project, and I don't happen to live in that area. I'm just north of there, but it's beautiful. But it comes down to, we need your help kind of understanding, what our commitments are going to be, and figuring out if it's something we can afford.
And I think that that's what we've been working through. So we'll get the final information back, and then we'll be able to present it back to the board.
I mean, the fact that you got it this far from the people I've talked to with the history, it's like you've already hit a home run. I mean, even move this thing this far, it's just incredible.
Well, this is it's an opportunity, the way the funding has come through for this project. So the from that standpoint, I mean, we have all, everyone in this room has been really kind of pulling for this, since the project was authorized, since the feasibility study was completed, and we all worked together, both federal and non-federal funding that went into the completion of the design. So I think the fact that the funding has come through on the federal side, of course, the state is out there, strong support. I think this is a unique opportunity. I can certainly understand how the numbers look, because let's face it, when you look 50 years out into the future and you project, you do your best to project those costs, inflating those costs, you kind of look into a crystal ball into what dredging costs are going to be 20 years down the line.
Contractors.
So, so when it comes down to it, the estimates that we have are the best we can do, looking that far out. But again, I think from our standpoint, that's one reason that we're really trying to look at whether or not there's a more streamlined way to build the projects. We can maybe take advantage, hopefully, of wider windows or no windows, or trying to position the project more favorably and most favorably to bid prices, getting efficient bid prices and such. So I think from our standpoint, that's right now what we can offer from our end, is a commitment to continue to obviously keep our nose to the ground and ensure that as we move forward, the project is, we're continuing to look for opportunities for efficiency.
Right, and also opportunities for funding for us, because, again, and I'm just trying to understand the project, but and this is probably a stupid question, is it mandatory that we commit to the reimbursement?
That is part of the project.
Yep.
So at this point in time, that is part of the project. Now, again, there's you have the option down the line at any point in time to terminate and pull out of the project. But you are witness with Surf City. North Topsail Beach and Surf City are joint non-federal sponsors for this project. So from that standpoint, I think I certainly encourage, and I know you are doing this, North Topsail Beach, to work very closely with Surf City.
We are.
And I understand, being a lawyer, whenever I see joint and several liability, I wouldn't give that to my kids, okay? Because that basically impacts my credit when you get joint and several liability. I understand where the project's
I know I have kids, so yeah, I get it.
But you wouldn't do it. It's like, I'm not gonna, wait a minute, if they default, I've got to pick it up.
But I think,
that's, to me, in the work that I've done, that's a black line in any contract I've ever had, because now I'm taking on somebody else's liability, and it affects my financial, status. It affects my ability to borrow, everything, right down the line. I mean, you do a credit check on somebody, and I've guaranteed somebody else's loan, that counts against me. And so those are stuff we just have to work through.
And we have.
And again, I just looked at, you saw my comments in the contract, and I was limiting those. But it's when I look at something like that, I want to make sure that we are treating you fairly in this thing too, because if we can't, we want to be upfront with you. And like I said, I'm only one person here, but have no issues with the project itself. It's trying to figure out if we can pay for it. Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I think Alderman Gray, we have talked about the liability issue with Surf City directly, and we can talk with Mr. Eads more about that. And I do believe that I certainly understand, and I think everybody here does, all you can do is the best estimate you can. We're going to be billed actual, not the estimate.
Correct.
So, we've got to start somewhere, and we can continue to have this dialogue.
Right. And again, my issue is not with the base project. It's looking at the liability related to a commitment over 50 years to do something. And in your career, I don't think you've seen prices go down much over a 50-year period. That's the concern we've got, and that's why we're asking them to model this out for us. We don't want to go back to the people living in this town and tell them their taxes got tripled. Okay, because 10 years from now, the renourishment is going to be X and not 3X. It's nobody's fault. But in the energy business and the drilling stuff, you would think with all the stuff going on, guess what? Rigs are still costing just as much as they've been doing the booms. There was no decrease in getting rigs to drill. That's counterintuitive. And I'm sure you're going to see the same thing in the dredging stuff. You would think, well, if there's less projects, that doesn't necessarily fall, the prices are going to go down. That's true.
And I don't anticipate prices in dredging to do that.
That's
more of an oligopoly there, kind of
exactly
market what they're doing. Same time, you can go back and look at, projects that have a design engineered beach. When storms hit, they protect way better than the ones that did.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's kind of insurance policy that you don't hope you don't have to use, but when you do have it, it's paid dividends. Other thing I would say is, some, the concerns when the project was authorized on why is there not a whole, all rooftops are constructed, cover issues. The portion in this project when we're coming, getting it on getting it kind of set, federal government coming with some money, the state's coming with some money. And where with the projects you're talking with Frank, he's talking with FEMA for reimbursement in the same situation on a named storm, we're have access to get supplemental funding from Congress, which is proactive. So, sign the PPA, we're estimating every 6 years now. If the say you were to build a terminal and your erosion rates were to go down on the beach, and we didn't need to do it, but every 8 years or every 10 years, we would look at it on a real-time basis and survey the beach and make adjustments for needs. But,
I have a question too, and again, I'm 3 weeks into it, so I'm trying to understand it too, and so I'm not here to try and talk you into anything. We're here to articulate what you get, should you do it, and what we probably bring to the table. But as I'm trying to understand this, and in your points about financial modeling, I'm tracking all and make great sense. Do you factor in that do nothing option, i.e., so that project is not put in place and a storm hits and the financial impact of that course of action and how that balances out? Is that what they do for you, or is your wife's model?
Right. Now, all the model is for me is looking at the cost, okay? But it's I think again, I built my house 2 years ago and we've been a resident here for about 18 months. But the current debt that we have relates to the same beach area that we're doing this project in. And we've got $14 million in debt sitting on the exact same place that you guys are going to build this site. Right? And so, what I'm concerned about is it doesn't end up being a one.
But still, Alderman Grant, we do have a lot of dune issues down in that area still, when you look at that shoreline. So
like I said,
I think
great conversation, and I understand everything. I'm just trying to, as I'm learning this, and trying to understand the cost benefit analysis of all of our coastal risk management. How does that get calibrated with, we don't do anything, storm hits, wipes out?
I hadn't thought about that.
And how does that get counted into the
It has to be, and that's part of that project. But the issue that I see out there has nothing to do with you all, except the perception of a lot of our citizens is that this project is free to the town. It's a federal project. Okay, how can you not do a free project?
I guess.
Okay, and when you start showing people numbers that it's not free, what do you mean it's not free? Well, it's a federal project. Well, yeah, they're kicking in 65%. I love that. I mean, I'd love to have somebody build something for me, take 65% of the cost, but it's not a free project. But if that's the perception you guys get, if that's the perception, it's like, well, you idiots. Free is free, right? But it's not free. Right. And I think that's the hard part to get over. When we're talking, we had some people, write in, how can you not do this project? And it's like, all the benefits you've talked about, it's going to be a better beach, it's going to be the people down there, it's going to be wonderful, the town is going to be wonderful. But it comes back to what are we able to afford? And everybody here in this room's got a budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're what I don't want to leave and make you feel like you've got to make a decision immediately today. We're tracking for when we got supplemental funds. Surf City had a federal project, their private project, they stopped for us to come. So we're making a drive to be able to put a solicitation out and award a contract for Surf City on Topsail. They'll start on that end and come this way, right? For us to meet that contract, we're going to have to use existing one is November 16th to April 30th. And that's what's driving the hot pocket. If you need, and we're trying to get in a position to get to the federal one that contract was. I don't want to say this because I know Surf City would like that building and going, but I don't want you to feel like that you have to say, yes or no to the overall project today. So if you say, I need some more time, I'm sure Surf City wouldn't be happy, but there's still discussion we can have. And I don't mean months and months and months. But like Pam says, our resource team is working on updated environmental coordination. So much as could be updated the cost estimate, we can, but the mayor said exactly, we're gonna pay actual. So, if it's at 237, if it's $180 million, as you win on the document.
But if it's 280, we lose.
Right, but when the price is coming for bids, you're gonna pay what it's gonna pay.
Mhm.
So same with your job, So you're making budget estimates, you pay as you go.
No, it's helpful. Like I said, it's just my feeling is we've got to see what those guys tell us. Okay, because we also don't know what other covenants we have in existing agreements because we haven't looked at that. And, and that's going to be a key for us as well.
Can we back up, sir, to, you mentioned the November dredge window. When is that decision point necessary? Like, when do you need the green or red from Surf City and North Topsail as far as awarding a contract to make that time?
And you can even.
We're tracking to have an executed PPA sometime in September, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Right, correct. But our process to get that PPA finalized with all the blanks and the numbers filled in and such, for us to get there, we have to keep the process moving. So, so we are looking for that information in, I'm gonna say real time, which means very soon. Otherwise, I think as a team, we would need to just say, oh, all right, we're not gonna be able to make this contract in Surf City this fall, we're gonna have to push that off. So, and again, we've been, as you all know, we've got a great coordinated team on this with both North Topsail Beach and Surf City and the Port. So, so if that's where we are, then we would take that on.
I don't know if you know this, I didn't know this, Surf City hasn't spent any money on it, basically. We've got, right, I mean, they really haven't done much work.
They trucked in some sand, I think.
No, I'm talking about like a project like we did.
They have been waiting for this federal project. They have been waiting
over
for this
10
federal
years.
project for over 10 years.
Yeah.
Mr. Curley, at the head of the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission, has made it very clear from representing Surf City for many years now that they have really been waiting for this project. So you're absolutely right. And to look at those beaches in Surf City, it's clear that they've been waiting for this project.
So
Well,
then,
I
so-
asked them at a meeting, and Pam, you were there, and this goes back, sorry to interrupt you, probably goes back to 2012. I think you were right out of high school then.
I think so.
No, she's a junior.
I asked Mike Curley in a meeting, he was the chairman of the Shoreline Protection Commission at the time, and he was a commissioner or whatever, alderman or whatever councilman they call him down there. I said, what's your plan B? What's your plan B if the federal North Topsail Surf City project never gets approved? Because we were through that whole process of, first it gets looked at and approved, and it gets on the WRDA, and and I know I'm using a lot of layman's terms here, but and then it gets approved, but it doesn't get obligated funding, and then we sit around and wait on that and work on that for a couple, 3 years and hope and pray, and then boom, all of a sudden it did. And again, you could have knocked me over with a feather on this thing.
Yeah, but what was his answer to your question as to what his plan B was?
He got so red in the face that I thought he was gonna have an aneurysm. Okay, he got as red in the face as Richard Peters' shirt before he said, I don't have one.
I remember that.
Remember that?
I remember that answer.
And he was angry. But the point is that we've been doing things, and, the longer it took, just for background from this side, is, the longer this thing got prolonged and it didn't get to WRDA, it didn't meet certain tick marks, never got funded, that was why we finally went out 13, 14, 15 and said, we got to do something down here. And that kind of goes to Rick's point of, we're paying off a debt for that same area of the beach because we had to do something. And I think nobody knew about Hurricane Florence at the time, but I think had we not done something back then in phase 5, we would have probably lost some houses and probably a good chunk of Topsail Road down there. So, we had to do something, and so it's kind of got us in where we are with the money side of it, at least somewhat.
Yeah, we were just looking at this project.
without the other one, it would be a different. Yeah. And that's like saying I don't have a mortgage on my house.
And we've got to admire a town that looks at me. You're looking to solve the problem for all your constituents the best way you can. And Carter County's doing the same thing. Other communities are doing the same thing. And this is just a way this is something in your toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure we jump through any hoops, answer any questions we can.
Appreciate that. You can GoFundMe.
I was thinking that.
So
And the thing was, all the way back, I was surprised when this thing finally did get green lighted, because we had worked on it and been so many years, so many, it's kind of like the commercial with the guy with the fishing rod. He almost got it.
Right, and that's the way it was year after
So
year.
close, and especially, Pam worked so hard on it for us, and everybody down in Wilmington District, and it just didn't seem like we were getting any traction, and it was absolutely nothing from what was going on down in your shop. It was funding, and it was up the Beltway. It was all up the Beltway, and I was shocked.
Right, shocked to go from really 0 to 60. I mean, nothing to all of it, to all of it, not just the first increment, which is we initially pretty much assumed that if we got a new start construction funding, it would be an increment to start the project.
Yeah.
But in this case, where we got the whole thing, so, it's not surprised, we were all surprised. I think we were all pleased and surprised, and, as Bob said, we're here to answer your questions, because obviously it wasn't a situation that anybody really anticipated all of a sudden, to be honest, so.
It's more like
Whatever
0 to
we-
100. I used to describe what we're entering into with you all, because the business I had did is sign 30-year contracts. And I said, it's a marriage with no chance of divorce. And that's what you're entering into. It's a long-term marriage.
So it sounds like the next steps, just so we can also keep moving here, it's gonna be a really long night, is we'll be receiving back the PPA document updated with what goes through you guys and your legal team, right, for our
We'll
review?
get you the responses to the we'll certainly
Okay.
get you the responses to the questions.
Okay.
The maintenance document too, there were 2 documents referenced.
Yeah.
Now, the maintenance document is a document that is not prepared until the project is completed. So that is not a document that currently exists. Now, what we have done is provided a sample for Ocean Isle Beach, which is dated 2002, and as I understand it, Bob, is the newest O&M manual that Wilmington District has prepared. So we provided that to Mr. Gilbride and Brewer as examples, and we've got an answer on a couple of examples on the types of activities that are included in this.
Okay.
It just came out this morning.
Perfect.
Yes, and Pam was kind enough to give me the final document. I read it this morning. If anybody would like to go through it,
That's the decision document.
That's the decision document. I didn't realize it was the Gutenberg.
He said he was the 50-page executive summary.
No, that is the executive summary.
No, this is the decision document.
That's the feasibility, the decision document in this case is the feasibility report. That was
Rick, you
completed
can take
in
that home.
2010.
No, that's something away from my car. Mike, the one thing I wanted to
Okay, anything, do you guys have any additional questions for us? We appreciate you
I'll
coming.
just say to Colonel Bennett's point, if you haven't seen the drone flyover of Oak Island, their West End, I encourage all of you to look at it. Not that they exercised a no option, but I mean, I don't even think it was a hurricane force when it went through there. If it was a small one, it's total. The governor was there all afternoon.
It's horrible.
It's a total destruction. It's bad.
Yeah, I mean, we were down yesterday looking at Ocean Isle, looking at the impacts there and how these projects help, mitigate some of that stuff. So again, it's an education process for me as well. So I do appreciate you all letting us come and sit on it. I will tell you, I mean, I'll brag on it for a little bit. Within the South Atlantic Division, which is Wilmington, Savannah, Jacksonville, Mobile District, these 2 folks here are really kind of the SMEs. Their collective experience on these types of projects is leveraged all across from Mobile, Regent Ford. So They are here to help you. I mean, there is nobody that knows this more inside and out, and can get you across the finish line if that's what you want to do.
If you need a nudge, they'll give you one.
We're here to support you. If you need us, let us know. Again, we're all partners in this thing, and we're committed to your success.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Okay.
Now it's good.
Now it's Deb.
You might not want to meet tomorrow and Monday about it.
Ms. Hill, are you ready for yours?
Down there. 372.
You can keep that pointed at Susan.
Call me, I'll get time off, guys, but you talk. Okay.
Thanks, Bob. Take care.
Are you ready?
Yes, this is gonna be a public hearing.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and get started with the staff report, and then you open up the public
Mm-hmm.
hearing for comment.
Mm-hmm. And all I have is, okay, but it's for the proposed amendment for a garage apartment.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Let's go ahead and open the hearing so Deb's comments can be part of the public.
Okay, so do I need a motion to open the public hearing?
Yes, so moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Open public.
Okay, over the past several years, we've received, a few requests to build a guest house or a garage apartment. And they've been denied based on not just table 4.1 in our UDO, but also a section in our flood ordinance that states that accessory structures will not be habitable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we recently had an application, and unfortunately I had to deny it for both those reasons. And on the NFIP side, I reached out to North Carolina Department of Public Safety, who in turn reached out to FEMA Region 4 in Atlanta. And lo and behold, FEMA Region 4 in Atlanta came back with the interpretation of when it's habitable, that makes it not an accessory structure.
Huh.
So it took a little, it really is kind of a paradigm shift because we've interpreted that, that policy for so long, even to the point that NFIP says, well, let's check with FEMA and let's see what FEMA says, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I included the excerpt out of the email from FEMA Region 4 and brought this matter up to the planning board as quickly as I could to where they could make a recommendation, we could advertise it for the Board of Aldermen for your consideration. So the definition that's already in the UDO is accessory dwelling unit, right? And so and then all of you can read it for yourselves. An accessory dwelling unit is a residential dwelling unit located on the same lot as a single-family dwelling unit, either within the same building as the single-family dwelling unit or in a detached building. Secondary dwelling units shall be developed in accordance with the standards set forth in this ordinance and only in those zoning districts which the use is listed as a special use. So that's another option for you. You could allow a guest house or an accessory dwelling unit or a garage apartment as a special use permit, in which case if Lenny Danetti's wanted to build a small little bungalow, Lenny's definition of small, little bungalow on his property to where his children or family members would have a place to stay whenever they came to visit, separate and apart from where he is. Then he could either apply for a special use permit, or if you wanted to allow for it it would be permitted by right, then if you allowed it permitted by right, then it would be approved at the staff level. So one of the things that we discussed with the planning board is that now everybody's gonna wanna build a second house on the property or garage apartment. And many lots are already maxed out because of impervious surface, setback, et cetera. Some are not. So that would certainly be a consideration, but we think by and large that the impervious surface would, or the max impervious surface would kind of help, monitor that. And I didn't put a size restriction in there, I didn't propose a size restriction, but typically with a guest house or a garage apartment or an accessory dwelling unit, an accessory unit is going to be subordinate to your principal structure. And so it would have to be clearly subordinate to your main house, right? So if you have your house there and you say, Deb, I'm going to build my mother-in-law a little guest house, and it's like 5 times bigger than your house, well, that's just, that doesn't fit.
Accessory.
Yeah, then it's not an accessory. But then what, if you have property and that's how you want to do it, then you just consider the original house, the accessory, and then your mother-in-law mansion that becomes the principal unit, you could do that. So with FEMA Region 4 providing their interpretation, it really kind of opened the door for the town to consider, and for Board of Aldermen to consider, planning board to look at it, whether or not you want to allow a guest house. We do have guest houses at least in two places that I know right off the top of my head.
Go ahead, okay.
I do have a question before you go further. I'm assuming in all this discussion, when you're talking about ancillary or whatever, you're talking about above the flood level. It would be above the garage.
It has to be.
It wouldn't be ground level.
It cannot be.
Right. And then just a question, do you distinguish between attached and detached? Because a detached is basically a house.
That's one of the.
Right? I mean, it's to your point. I can build a house, I don't know if the permitting is different or whatever. But when somebody tells me it's an accessory building, I think about, a mother-in-law, they used to call mother-in-law up there, where everything was connected. There might be a garage there and it was above the garage. That's the typical, at least what I've seen. But do you think that's an issue or not?
I think it depends. If you're an owner and our language is such that it prohibits you, then you may be tempted to argue with me all day long till the cows come home that a roofed walkway makes it an addition. Okay? I disagree. So, I disagree. But, I really don't enjoy denying applications. And that's not really what y'all pay me for. I get paid to think outside the box and to take proposals to the planning board and for them to consider them and then to bring them to you to say, hey, is this something that you want to do, or do you want to continue to prohibit guest houses? Now, and this has been going on since before we did our UDO in 2011, because Ash Island, in their restrictive covenants, provides for their HOA, and in their restrictive covenants provides for guest houses. So those have been like one or two. Those have been the two out of the 3 requests that I've had were from Ash Island, and they're like, but it's in my restrictive covenants. We can do it. Now, I can't sign off on it, right? So there you're dealing with 10-acre tracts if you include the water front and back. Right. But there are certainly, the tracts of land are certainly larger than 5,000 square foot property that's owned MHR.
Right.
So I would not think that you would have a lot of guest houses on either R5 or MHR property that's 5,000 square feet, because those property owners are doing their best to be able to get, their 2,500 square foot house in there for the most part, right?
Not to build an add-on.
So the decision that you're looking at, because I'm trying to understand, what are you asking of the board tonight? Are you asking for us to have the planning board explore it further, or are you asking us to?
No.
That's
I ran it by the planning board, and they made a recommendation unanimously to permit accessory dwelling units, in parentheses, guest houses, garage apartments.
We have a
As a
proposed
special
ordinance.
use.
That's what I was looking for on my phone. I don't.
Yeah, we have a proposed ordinance.
When I did it and I ran it by them,
Can you send that to me?
I didn't think
That's what I
about it
was
long
saying.
enough to consider the possibility of doing a special use. But I bring that up with you tonight to let you know that that's another option. If you didn't feel comfortable allowing it to be approved on the staff level, then you could certainly require a special use permit. And then that way, it would have to go before the planning board and back to you to where that you could consider each one. If you did
Recommend that. Well,
if you did that, I would certainly have you think about if there were other particular conditions. There's a section 4.03, I think it is
Brian, you said you recommend that?
yes, I'll explain why when I don't want to interrupt still.
Deb, what does the HOA want? The homeowners association as such. What are they advocating for?
I haven't discussed it with them. I don't report to them in that vein whenever we're doing something like this. Because I had a permit that I had to deny, I was trying to work through it, and then when FEMA came back and provided their interpretation, which was quite different than the way that we have, or even NFIP, I believe, that we've understood it for so many years, that opens the door for us to think, okay, is this something that we want to do? Right, so 403, if it was something that you wanted to do either as a special use permit or as a permitted use, I would certainly invite you to consider the possibilities in section 4.03 for use standards. And so a use standard could be something like not to exceed 25% of the total square footage of heated square footage or square footage of the principal dwelling. Right? You can do it like that. And certainly to keep the language in there that it has to be built to the same, standards as a principal unit, where it has to be the freeboard, it has to be elevated 2 feet above BFE. It's got to have breakaway walls. It's got to have flood vents, etc. Right?
I've got a question. It may not pertain at all, but what about sewer availability? I mean, don't we have rules on how many bedrooms can be and how many,
They would have to go and get a sewer.
They can
right, so they
upgrade
can, that would be figured out.
Right. Because
Okay.
we would be treating it as a separate residential structure. So part of that process is where's your sewer permit for the 2 bedrooms that you're gonna put there. Right? They already have a sewer permit for the 3-bedroom house. So where's your permit for your 2-bedroom house? Right?
And that all
They're still
would
gonna have to have the utilities.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing that you might want to consider too is that you only allow a guest house or garage apartment for single family homes. Because you start getting into duplexes where the lots should not have been subdivided to begin with, because a duplex is a single structure, or really even a townhouse. I doubt if there's very many townhouses, but it would certainly be very complicated. So, we don't get into, in the planning board, we discussed this, that you don't get into, Joanne's just gonna run it. Okay, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares whether it's her mother-in-law or her best friend or she's running it out?
Mhm.
It's the construction of that accessory residential unit for her.
So one question that we should be deciding as the board is, are we gonna allow this, garage apartment, call it that, or house, whatever? It's gonna have to conform within the square footage allowed for that particular lot and that zone, correct? It's gonna have to fall within the total available square footage
That's right.
for a structure on that
And all the
property.
setbacks and everything.
Well, or we could limit to a certain percentage, you said, like, say, 25% of any structure.
It's a given that it has to meet all those standards. It has to meet the zoning. There's no exemption to it. It has to meet the impervious surface. Okay? And so the addition would be to say, so you don't have two twin towers out there that you say, clearly you have to make your accessory dwelling unit subordinate to your principal unit. And how else are you gonna do that other than restricting it to the square footage or the percentage of the square footage of that principal unit?
Brian?
Well, I think the subsequent conversations make our point. Number one, I'll start out by saying this is something relatively new. So, two, a good portion of the structures in town are non-resident property owners and we're going to be looking to maximize their profit.
It's another rental. Business.
Exactly. A special use permit puts two groups, sets of eyes on it, and we can append reasonable conditions to a special use permit. So, I mean, what my fear would be if we just do it as a use as a matter of right, you're going to have some clever surveyors and engineers that are going to basically build another structure out there. And so
you want to stay away from the mini motels.
Well, I mean, that got away from the entire
Outer Banks,
East Coast. Yeah. I mean, I was looking at Corolla for some potential vacation places. Number one, I'm gonna have to get a second job to rent one of those houses. But I mean, it's like Marriott's. I mean, it's great. And
they're mini motels.
They're booked for 3 months.
I've seen 15 cars in those places up at Corolla.
This is a great idea, and I commend Deb for hashing this out. To answer Mr. Peters' question earlier, it sounds like if the HOA covenants don't prohibit it, then they would be in favor of it. But if we go to the special use permit, there would be hearings on a public hearing on it, and the neighbors could come in and give meaningful input.
Yeah.
So I think it's the perfect compromise from not allowing them and allowing them no matter what, and it gives us more control to see the type of things we'd be looking at.
You want to vet it, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
It also one of the things too to consider from us taking care of our older parents is it gives property owners the ability to expand their dwelling to take care of their parents.
And I think,
or children that are having to move back home.
and a proposed structure that would accommodate that reasonably, I think the planning board would recommend, and I think this board or future boards would approve. But I'm more concerned about basically a second house being placed on lot. There's nothing we can do once it's built, it's done.
Well, right, not just that it's a second house, but if Joanne comes in and she says.
Why am I always the one coming in?
You're right there.
You're closest to her. Hey, don't sit there, Joanne.
Hey, let me be the skunk at the picnic.
I was gonna use Tom as an example, but I was gonna set you up first,
Okay,
and then I was gonna.
All right, you go ahead.
So Joanne comes in and she says, "Hey Deb, I've got gonna take care of my mother-in-law, and I want to build this little. It's 25% of the square footage of the house. It's just a little 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom bungalow, just So cool, no problem." And then Tom comes in and Tom says, "My old girlfriend, I got to take care of my old girlfriend."
And the four
Oh, wait,
children,
wait,
and the
wait.
four children.
No, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, his,
My wife's watching it.
uh,
She used to like you.
sorry, his Marine
Lights are
Corps
off,
buddy.
lights are cheap.
Wait, Tom comes in and he wants to take care of his lifelong Marine Corps buddy, Colonel Sanders. And build him a, little modest 25% total square footage bungalow. But I don't really trust Tom, and I think that he's gonna be renting that out. That's not, that's not it for me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And you can't dictate, once you allow whatever that structure is, as long as they have their sewer permit. The one thing to be mindful of, one of the things that I would have you be mindful of is, as you increase dwelling units, you increase traffic, and our infrastructure can only take so much. So that's certainly a
Another reason
consideration.
why, especially.
That's Brian's point.
Well, because that's one of the criteria, you could append a condition related to parking.
Are we discussing there, or are we finishing with your presentation? Because I have some issues here, with all of this, and been on this island 18 years. And I've seen how some of the building development has gone, and there's a lot of people out there who are building houses that are retiring and doing it the right way, or even building a house that they turn into a vacation rental, and it's all done above board, and it's all done right. And they're not trying to cut any corners, and they're not trying to cheat the system, and they're doing everything they're supposed to do. But then there's that percentage. There's that percentage that speaks to your comments about a special use permit. And speaks to your comment, and once it's up, I mean, once that rounds down range, it's out the gun. I mean, you're not gonna pull that bullet back in. And I just wonder if we're not setting ourselves up for that 1% who's gonna put their mom in a house that's got 3 flights of stairs when you count the one off the ground and know they don't have an elevator. For all these other people who are gonna try to maximize their vacation rental footprint, and they don't live here, and they're probably never gonna live here, and they're gonna increase some of the issues on our infrastructure, to your points, all because that way they can raise more rental money. And I know that's probably not a real popular view with some of the people that are watching, but you know what? Gotta look at the people who live here full time too.
And you have to find the balance of reasonableness and flexibility in design, as well as what you can afford to, as well as what your limitations are on your infrastructure. Because you've got to think not just for today, you've got to think about 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and how this is going to impact.
Well, doesn't it sound like with the discussion, Tom and everybody else, that it sounds like we just keep leading back to that special use permit that town attorney had.
For discussion on special.
Well, the other thing too, Joanne, I would add is, it's not her job to be a traffic cop on this
Right.
stuff, and to have to tell people, it's
Right.
like, because all of a sudden it's gonna be, well, yeah, it was Deb's judgment that I didn't get
Right.
this, or I didn't do that. That's
Right.
not fair to her. Bring it back
Right.
and run it, as you said, Brian, and it's like, because that, like you said, you shouldn't be on the phone arguing with somebody for 3 days over something that doesn't make any, bring it in and make your case, right?
So do we need to give?
Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with arguing with people and telling them no means no.
I know.
No, but would you be okay with it, the special use permit route?
But I'm certainly, I certainly think that the special use permit, which is why I brought it up, gives you a little bit more, gives the town governing body and the planning board time to kind of slow your roll. Let's see how we feel about this. So certainly, if you want to send it back to the planning board for them to consider some bullets for the use conditions, or the use, I said it like twice.
Standards.
Thank you, use standards. One of the things I can also do, have not had the time to do that, and I apologize to you, but I had also wanted to reach out to some of the other coastal towns, particularly, to see if they do allow for accessory dwelling units, what kind of criteria do they place on that? So then we can be consistent with, maybe somebody out there has gone through this and they've paved that road or, you know, and kind of make it easier on us.
So do we need to close the public hearing now and then provide
Well,
direction?
You need to see if
I think
anyone else
Susan
wants
has
to
another
speak at the public hearing.
Do we have the
Anybody signed
ability
up?
for them to speak?
No one signed up.
I wanted to just
I'm sorry,
make a
Susan.
comment or
Right.
whatever. The new thing with the tiny houses, it could be possible that people could put 2 tiny houses on their property too.
It's an
So do you want
interesting
it,
point.
And then you've got a village of tiny houses.
Yeah.
well, that-
You know, I mean,
Hey, my wife said it's 5 bucks.
but I mean, they're quite popular right now.
right, so,
Yeah, they
so
are.
one of the conditions that you could place on it is 1 accessory dwelling unit per lot, and that it's restricted to single family only.
Do you have somebody?
There's somebody back here has a comment.
As the fire marshal for the town, obviously there's some stipulations I would like to see on this, depending on where it's located next to a dwelling, you know, stuff like that. From the
And
fire side
I
of it.
think he should be invited to the planning board meeting. And then a package be brought back after all these things are vetted out and considered.
I would imagine that it's consistent with the North Carolina building code as far as the distance.
No, like, so there's things when the dwelling is located too close to another dwelling, like I can enact like, you know, fireproof, fire retardant material, stuff like that.
Okay.
You know, that isn't in the building code, so.
All right.
And ingress and egress, it's not necessarily, I mean,
I got
So-
to.
Well, that got-
Mayor, I suggest that if no one signed up and no
Wait, so am I closing?
one's here to speak, it will close the public hearing.
Yeah, I think you need a motion and
Motion?
a second and an aye and all that.
Do I have a motion
Motion,
to close the public
I
hearing?
make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
I just think a direction to Ms. Hill to bring this back before the planning board
Mhm.
to get their input on a special use scheme, including construction standards, and to make sure they seek and obtain the input from
Not
those
construction standards, but use standards.
use standards. Excuse me.
You're in at the fire department.
The input from both the police department and fire department.
Okay.
As well as the building inspector.
Does somebody want to make that motion?
I don't even think you need to make a motion if that's.
Just direction.
Right, that's the consensus of the board. Deb, you understand the marching orders?
Everybody in favor of that?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
And I'll say that I'll email everybody, give them a chance, but my planning board meets next Thursday, so I would need that input sooner rather than later.
Can you accommodate that, chief?
Yes. Well, honestly, no, because I don't know what we're discussing here. I mean, I can't just give you what I think we need on a building that hasn't materialized.
Right.
You see what I'm
Well,
saying?
but I'm saying you can say at a minimum, I need this much distance between this or this, you know. Deb, what was the planning board meeting date?
It's next Thursday, whatever, next Thursday.
Can you either attend that in person or remotely?
Yeah, probably.
Or get your thoughts, initial thoughts to the planning board.
I should be able to do next Thursday.
I think we
It's
lost
the
our video
13th.
too.
Yeah, I can do
August
next Thursday.
13th.
Okay. The next item is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
We'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
right, we're moving now. Okay, continuing business. We are on the emergency operations plan. Mr. Gilbride?
Yeah, I didn't even bring it with me, but I had sent that out to
Yep.
everybody, and I think a couple of times now.
Right
and I
before
would
the
just
storm.
like the boards, what's that?
Before the storm.
Before the storm, yes. And I'd just like approval to go ahead and adopt that as our emergency operations plan for the future. It follows the NIMS regulations and the FEMA outlines, and covers all the bases.
Are we good giving direction on there?
Do we do a motion and a second and an aye, or do we just?
Or is it just direction?
Just pass it, you can pass it by resolution, but I just want to make sure the chapter 166A emergency powers is not part of the plan, right? That's within the ordinances, because that has to be by ordinance.
Right, yeah, it's not in there. There's a sample in there for the mayor to use.
Right, okay, but as far as all powers, that's still to be.
No, that's all the power statement.
So a resolution passing this plan is sufficient.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, capital improvements update, Mr. Benson and Alderman Grant. We're limiting Alderman Grant. I'm just kidding.
In the interest of time tonight, I think we've already discussed quite a few capital improvements items during the meeting so far. We were charged to give an update at
Yes.
the monthly meetings. That's why it's on the agenda tonight. But in the interest of time, we're going to be considering the contract with DEC, the Carters, and going to give us some guidance on where we're going to be going with our capital improvements.
Well, and also, we reached out to the town manager to go to all the department heads and give us what their 5-year looks are going to be like, so we can incorporate it.
Okay, perfect. Any questions, guys? Okay, new business. So we've got the TISPC, the appoint the citizen representative, Mr. Benson.
Just by way of informing the public who may still be watching us tonight, the Shoreline Protection Commission was chartered by the 3 towns that make up Topsail Island to work on shoreline protection and other matters that relate to coastal resiliency and things like COBRA and so forth. Each town has 3 representatives on the commission, 2 from North Topsail Beach, 2 are aldermen, and 1 is a citizen representative. Our citizen representative was recently appointed as alderman, sitting on my right tonight, Ms. Meyer. So we need a new citizen representative. I would like to thank all of the citizens who applied for the call to volunteer for this committee. We had a large number.
Like 11, right?
Yeah, something like that. A large number of
11.
citizens volunteered to serve on this committee, which is a kind of a change from the past, and we've had trouble finding people for committees. So anyway, I would like to recommend to the board, after discussion with this person, that we nominate Connie Lettle as our representative. I've talked to Connie about this. She is a longtime resident of the island. As a newspaper reporter and editor, she covered the Shoreline Protection Commission meetings as well as the board meetings for each of the towns when she was doing her editing work. She is very enthusiastic. She has looked through, as we ask all candidates to do, the goals and accomplishments of the committee, of the commission. So I put her name forward for the board's consideration as our citizens representative.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to second the nomination of Connie Plettle for all the reasons that Alderman Benson just stated. I've known Connie for a long, long time. Been an involved member of the town from the very beginning, going back in at least a decade. And I've also spoken with her, and I think she'd be a perfect fit.
So it may not be in order, but I would.
Third, you're a
Third.
third.
Or the newbies get.
Connie, I think would make a wonderful candidate.
Okay.
I would fit, but then that's a drinking.
So do we, we have a first and a, are you seconding?
I'm seconding.
Okay. Can we take a vote, please? Would you mind taking a vote?
Sure.
Well, did you have discussion?
No, I was voting.
Oh, you were voting, okay.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Peters,
Aye.
Alderman Grant,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Aye.
Alderman
Aye.
Leonard.
You better vote aye.
Okay, good. The next item is Ms. Hill for the planning board and board of adjustments.
No, I've got 2 items here. We amended the agenda, Mayor. The
Oh,
other
sorry.
item is a congressional visit. Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission has arranged for our congressional delegation, namely Representative Rouser and Representative Murphy and their staffs to visit Pikeville Island sometime in August.
The 27th.
27th of August. And we are charged by Chairman Smith of the Shoreline Protection Commission for us to have a mini meeting with that group, and we need to decide, you know, what we're going to talk to them about, our talking points, and what we're going to show them in town as part of their visit, because we just can't sit in the room. We need to take them and show them what's going on here.
So, and there's supposed to be a pre-meeting before that 27th. And what I would like to suggest was the folks that were on the Washington call be the ones, if the board is satisfied with that attend that meeting. So that was Mr. Gilbride, town manager, myself. Oh, you won't be here, will you?
I may not be here for that part.
No,
Okay.
I'd be happy to do that. One of the things that, and I was going to mention this in my Alderman's report, but I'll talk about it now. One of the things on the virtual meeting that we had in July that Congressman Murphy had mentioned about was that he had been down here the week prior visiting Camp Lejeune and the New River Air Station. He actually got a ride on an MP-22 Osprey, and he flew over the north end, and he started talking about the inlet, and he started talking about how we needed, using his words, a jetty. And
he did,
and how he was going to work to try to help us with our problem in terms of some of the restrictions that we have at the state level. And so he's very interested in that. And so probably one of the first places we need to make sure that we take the good congressman is up to the inlet. And the visit went extremely well. The telephonic meetings went very, very well. They were very positive. I think we made some serious headway with Cobra. And that was kind of an add-on because I was surprised that he brought it up. It was not on our talking points or nor on any of our agenda to discuss that. And of course, when the congressman brought it up, we were more than happy to engage him in discussion on that issue. He is making this trip and visiting all the military installations because there is a push forward to try to get him onto the House Armed Services Committee, which would be a win for us too. And given the number of military installations in his district, it's a perfect fit. When you think about all of the state military facilities we have, Cherry Point, New River here, Bragg, Pope, Seymour Johnson. How many of those are in District 3, but they're all in Eastern North Carolina, and that's where he represents.
Tom, you mentioned that he said we needed a jetty. Right?
Yeah, that was his word. Yeah.
Do we need to pursue the terminal groin aspect?
He was talking about, he used the term jetty, sort of same thing.
we kind of circled it back
Generically.
around.
It was
But
generically,
the Corps would interpret them significantly.
Not worried about that. I'm just happy that we have a congressman who's on board with helping us resolve our erosion issues at the far north end of the site.
And from a financing standpoint too, that's fantastic.
So then, do
I'll
we
be
need,
saving that.
do we need a third person? Do you want, how has this happened in the past?
It's Shoreline Protection Commission that's heading this up. I don't know if you want to do it as a mayor. I don't know, and that would be good. And we could either have Mike do it, or you're not on the commission anymore,
Not
right?
anymore, no.
Mike probably should be Mike.
Okay, so
Okay.
is everybody fine with the
Fine.
three of us
Does
attending
that-
that, and then we'll put our thoughts together on.
Does that create an issue though with the elected officials?
No, because we're not going out to drink beer together and talk about the town. We're going out to do work, and I think we're okay.
Brian, do you have any issue
Attorney?
with that?
As long as, if we have 3, then we need to call it a meeting.
All right, well, we'll call it a meeting.
We've lost both video and
Okay. We can do that.
You need to take a recess,
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
man.
Is it 8 o'clock
Video
yet?
and audio.
Laura, was this a
remote?
Take me out to the ball, seventh inning scratch.
Was this a remote meeting or did we? Okay. If we can't establish audio, we're gonna have to reset.
For till another day. Okay, that'd be fine.
Can we at least go through the other part of the new business thing and the appointment?
We can't.
If you take any action, someone
We
consider
can't.
get it set aside.
Joanne, and seemingly in following up with what Tom has mentioned, if he's that, if he
Yeah, I was
realizes
on that
need,
meeting too. He
I mean,
was
to
good.
me, that just opens up a financial assistance
He's very,
aspect too.
yeah, it was a very good meeting. He's very interested. He's the only one that actually brought.
So my thought is if we could
We can't do
get
that by unanimous
some
consent. by
help
certain
there,
people
we
outside
could
the-
knock out a lot of these projects, just
Yeah.
like a financial planner would augment, you take your, yeah, your least one and knock it out.
If they're meeting next Thursday, we're not meeting before.
All this skepticism that these guys are producing back
Are
here
the people on the
could
planning board, are those
evaporate.
It
the
could,
alternate step or
for
those
sure.
permanent that you're recommending?
They would fill, everyone comes up as an alternate, and then as the regular members,
Right, but the ones that you recommended are coming in as alternates, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay.
Here's what I would recommend, let Mr. Gilbride or poll the board. And then whoever it looks like had you had to vote tonight, these are the people that would have been appointed. Deb can tell them that informally, it looks like they are.
Watch, you're still connected.
And then we ratify that, take a formal vote.
There you go.
That's fine.
This thing is,
You're good.
all the
It's just she's got it
times
hanging out
it's
and then we
not
have
at all.
more people
I
in line.
understand.
It's like, it's just we need to get it done.
Yes.
You know, it's been 2 months.
Well, we just shut down some in Scotland County because their planning board wasn't simultaneously broadcasting, and their lawyer realized that the court.
We back up then?
Court was gonna
We should,
enter an injunction.
give me just a minute.
Are we up yet?
No, we may have to reset.
I don't want to take any action, Rick.
All I can tell you, the picture shows 2 people in the corner and all we got is a fire chief. It's a go.
So if we do have
That is
to,
bizarre. That must be a.
We have to reset. We have to go into closed session first to knock that out.
Can't do it.
we have to, because we have to announce we're going into closed session.
Okay.
I was gonna say, if we have to recess because we can't get it back, then I think we're gonna need a special meeting because we do need that closed session.
I would suggest that because we're here, let's
You just recess
not-
the meeting and you
Are we doing
reconvene the
a
meeting.
debris pickup?
I know, I'm just saying we need to finish.
You're back up?
Okay,
All right,
special
we're back
meeting
on.
comes
We
first.
don't meet the
We're good?
criteria to trigger the contract on the debris.
Okay, Deb,
So
if
you're
we're
planning
back
board.
up, then it's planning board and board of
Yeah.
adjustment appointments. Let me pull that up.
I had somebody ask me,
Yeah, no, yeah.
because they, we usually do 2 a year or
That's you,
something
Deb.
anyway.
Well, we do the vegetative, I think it's 3 times.
Your recommendations to the planning board and the adjustment.
Yep,
Laura-
this is
Laura
planning board and
circulated.
board of adjustments. We've got a couple here.
I don't have that, can you, if you show me the screen?
I can show you, I have it on my phone.
But, been working, yeah. Lisa Brown has been really good about showing up to the meetings. I don't know what Alfred Fontana, I forgot what his background was, but I thought it was pretty exciting. Joseph Peterson and Lisa Lee Kozlowski, also from the Board of Adjustment. Joseph Peterson actually volunteered for the planning board, but he has I believe that he's a lawyer. And I think that it would be fabulous to have him on the Board of Adjustment.
I would agree with that.
So do you need one for the planning board and one? for the
No,
board
I
of
need two alternates for the planning board because you took my 2 guys. You took
We
my
left her for a better job.
Yeah.
Okay.
You took my 2, so I need 4. Rather than having 2 people do double duty, what I'd like to do, since there was so much interest in serving the town in various committees, that we would take advantage of that and give more people the opportunity, whether it was on the Board of Adjustment or on the planning board.
I agree.
You know, to that end, at some point, we might want to explore the feasibility of splitting them back out like we had them way back in the day when we had lots of volunteers. We had completely different planning boards and boards of adjustment in terms of membership. You know, I don't know how you feel about that.
As we get people trained, and that's the other thing too, is I can't start off, like if you did that thing, you said, okay, we're gonna separate everybody and, you know, you'll have more than half of new on each side. I really like the stability, and then as we get people,
Build out. Yeah.
as we get people trained,
Yeah.
and in particular with the Board of Adjustment, as well as the planning board. And as we have interest and keep the applications, and, you know, there'll be other people that are interested, but they need to attend the meetings. They need to, the alternates can certainly participate in the discussion. In the event that we're short of regular members, they can pop up into the regular member seat and vote just as a regular member would.
And that's what your recommendation is here. I'm sorry.
My thought was that we would phase this in over time, not kick it off between, you know, as of the first of the year or something, that we would phase it in over time as you were comfortable with the level of experience and knowledge and education and training.
Right.
Isn't that what you're starting?
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, well. Yeah.
How's the attendance been, Deb, for the last year or so?
That's, I can't remember the past few months, and because of COVID, there really hasn't been anybody that's showing up. You know, we might have like one or two. We did the same thing, we keep the distance and wear a mask. But I think so.
I mean, the members themselves, have they been,
Yeah, oh, yes.
okay?
Yeah, we've got a couple of members that still work. Some people don't, some people do. And so for the people that are working a full-time job, we need to be a little bit more flexible with them. And then also, you know, people leaving to go on vacation, but I do not recall having to cancel a meeting for lack of a quorum.
So,
Deb, just one quick question. See, the people you've recommended, you've vetted, you've looked at them, right? And they're people you're comfortable with having on.
I think I have met two of them. The other two I have not met. But because of their background, I found their background really interesting. And if they're willing to, you know, come in as an alternate and serve the town, and you know, I think that they'll. I don't know.
It's a good starting point.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't enjoy it and why they wouldn't have fun with us. You know, but you never know.
So you want a nomination for the two members to alternates as the planning board, and then another nomination for the two members to the Board of Adjustments? Is that how we do this? Well, I'll make the nomination that we nominate, or the motion that we nominate Lisa Brown and Alfred Fontana to the planning board as alternates.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
I'll make the motion that we nominate Lisa Kozlowski and Joseph
Peterson, I think.
Peterson, I'm sorry, to the Board of Adjustment as alternate members.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
No,
Thanks, Deb.
no? Okay. We have one no, so we have,
I have Carol Prince Breisinger or Joseph Bowinkle as a primary candidate there.
for the Board of Adjustment? Or the planning board?
I think Deb had put them down, another one is in there. I think that's for Board of Adjustments.
Well, the
No, that's for
motion,
Planning Board.
yeah, the motion already carried though. But
So
you
we've
can't
already
vote.
filled that one.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
because of the vote,
Okay,
okay?
so
Okay,
then I would change that to Board of Adjustment then.
but we did both. We just
Oh, we
voted.
did both?
Yeah,
Okay.
You just, yeah,
Okay.
you did too.
Next time.
Next time. Okay. Attorney's report,
No report other than, closed session.
okay. The mayor's report, I'm gonna have, Tom report out on the Washington calls. You already started that, but I think it would be good if you could elaborate on that. I'll report out on, I attended the UNWASA board meeting where we voted on some of the capital improvement projects, and I'm happy to announce that one of them that was approved was a booster pump for the water issues that we're having towards the south end of North Topsail Beach. So hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll be able to get those folks some increased water pressure. All right, and then we'll go around. So Alderman Peters.
Well, I don't have anything specifically to add that much, but I will just commend my fellow board members and you, Mayor, for the work that you're doing, which is very good.
Thank you.
So appreciate it. And last but not least, Laura and Deb. I'm getting myself in trouble here.
Yeah, everybody, right? Everybody.
Yeah, okay, so.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, David. And Brian, I continue. Sorry, guys.
Alderman Meyer.
Pardon?
I just wanted
Okay.
to thank all the people that called in or watching online. It's tough to stay with us sometimes. And also, we were working on possibly doing a, I don't know what you want to call it,
Function?
a fair, a fun fair or something.
Festival or
A
something.
festival or whatever coming up. But with COVID right now, I think it's gonna at least have to be in the spring.
Spring, okay.
Yeah, because, I mean,
There's no way it's gonna
it
happen.
just can't happen yet, but we can start working on a venue, which is gonna be difficult to find a place that is big enough to have booths and stuff for the kids and to park. So I'm thinking maybe the park for the fair and that parking across the street. So early spring, I think, would be a good time before the beach parking is utilized. And I'd be looking at some music, different bands, and we'll have some arts and crafts booths and rides for the kids, bouncy house or whatever. So we're gonna be working on that.
Perfect, thank you.
Just as an aside, John Hart and his wife Ann had been in charge of the crafts with Autumn Topsail. I would recommend you perhaps give Don a call and see if he will be interested in helping or at
That'd be
least
great.
giving you perhaps helpful advice and people who he has gotten for the crafts things.
Good idea, thank you.
Okay, good.
Alderman Grant?
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, one of the things that came up today in the discussion about the federal project, and I think that we need to make sure that we communicate to the citizens, it's not a free project. It will be the largest financial undertaking that this town's ever undertaken. And I think that, you know, it's our duty to get the message out to people about what that commitment is. Everybody loves the project, okay, but it comes down to, you know, a prioritization, a firehouse, and those type of things, and to make sure that whatever we commit ourselves to, right, that the citizens are happy with and that we are as well. So I just want, you know, and it's, like I said, when I hear people that are very much for it and everything else, I think everybody here is for it. The question is, can we afford it? And those are two
Yes, sir.
different questions. That's it.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I want to thank the town staff for the excellent job they did during the hurricane. I know we didn't go into an emergency operations center situation, but we had really great communication. The staff were out doing what they needed to do in a timely manner to protect our infrastructure. So kudos to town staff and employees. The other thing I wanted to mention was associated with the hurricane or tropical storm, whatever it was. My house was shaking pretty hard there for a while, so I don't know which it was. But One thing I noticed is because of the way the wind was coming, it didn't seem like we lost a particularly great amount of sand from the beaches. And for that, we can be thankful, although we were probably going to have to do a survey for FEMA to determine that for sure. But again, I just wanted to thank town staff for the excellent job they did during the hurricane before and afterwards.
Agreed. Alderman Leonard.
I'd like to start off also by echoing the comments of others here with respect to how well a job the town staff did and how well the town came through the storm. And Dave, I credit much of that to your leadership and to the manner in which you lead the staff. I think just your calm demeanor and the way you handle things, I think inspires confidence in your subordinates, and it certainly inspires confidence amongst at least this member of this board. Moving on, I want to talk a bit about July 22nd, 23rd. We had our virtual Capitol Hill visit. Should have gone back in March 23rd, week the 23rd. It all got shut down with COVID. Was rescheduled, and we met with using Zoom or whatever one of these things is, one of these virtual TV on your computer things. Sitting at the kitchen table, we met with first Senate Committee Senior Counsel on the Environment and Public Works, followed by Josh Bolin, who's a Senior Policy Advisor for Senator Byrd. We met with Representative Rouser and one of his legal assistants. We met with a legal assistant or a legislative assistant for Senator Tillis. And we met with Representative Murphy and his legislative assistant, Grace Celeste. And then we met with somebody from the House Subcommittee on Water, Ocean, and Wildlife. Our portion of it was all three towns, and our portion of these meetings dealt specifically with our efforts to remove North Topsail Beach areas that are still within the Coastal Barrier Resources System. We got what I felt to be very receptive treatment from all. We had good discussions. We had a lot of where do we go next? What can we do to help you kind of comments. I felt that we're probably closer now than we ever have been. The goal on both sides is to attach these the two bills that we have, one in the Senate and one in the House, two companion bills, is to attach them to other venues or vehicles and to get them passed through, hopefully in this current session. As an aside, as I mentioned earlier, Congressman Murphy had been here the week before. He brought up the issue of the erosion at the north end, and he brought up a hardened structure. And he knew that we were pursuing that, and he wants to help us with that in any way that he can. And so, what I think we can probably do is push forward using his legislative assistant, Ray Celeste, who, by the way, was a legislative assistant on Congressman Jones's staff, and see what we can work out with them. And probably the first place to start would be on August 27th, because the date that was picked, I know, was in part picked because Congressman Murphy couldn't make the previously scheduled date, so they're moving the date to accommodate him. So I have every bit of confidence that he will be here, and I think we take him up there first. We let him see what it looks like. We give him sort of a quick briefing on what we've done up to this point and what needs to be done to move forward on it. And
Did we lose it yet?
Tom, to your point,
yes.
If we could round up some of the pictures of the former front row, show him when he's up there, I think that'd be very powerful.
I actually have pictures of those houses being demolished.
And there were some storm photos also that I saw with the water coming underneath the current houses.
But the ones that were shown, Steve Foster was talking about shown in Europe, shows a house, islands, water.
Yeah.
I mean, like one of those little valley,
Yeah.
But I think that would be very effective.
I think so too.
But I think we made a lot of money with the meeting. It was certainly not the way I wanted to do it. But former Congressman McIntyre, who was our lobbyist up in Raleigh and in Washington, was very effective. He knew when to come in and speak, and he knew when to let the others in the room do the talking, and no question went unanswered. And we had a really good session.
Agreed.
Real happy with where it went, and hopefully we'll see an input to this whole Cobra mess. And that concludes my report.
Okay, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second?
Third.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
For the minutes, the purpose is to consult with the town attorney to preserve the attorney-client privilege.
And what I'd like to do is, I'll put the microphone on mute. I can put a cover over top of the camera, and I've got access to YouTube so I can monitor, make sure that everything's shut, so that we don't have problems with the connectivity, I guess, so
Well,
we got it going.
and I think the first topic,
Well, before that, let her mute it.
yeah, that's fine.
And all that, then we'll do then go ahead and get on YouTube and tell me if you can hear anything about that.
Deb,
Didn't mean
you
to
could
cut you off.
use this over the camera if you
I have a one's cap.
want. Oh, well, that makes more sense.
I'm sorry, we're professionals here. Let me do my job.
I was just thinking when you said you're gonna put a cover on it, it reminded me of when my grandfather had this.
Are you going
Had
in
this
closed session?
parakeet.
You already made a
put a
motion?
cover on a bird at
Yes,
night.
yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah. That's how my first wife killed my parrot. I was walking and she was home a bunch of them, she covered up all day long.
I have my parents' parrot.
Okay, now you're not gonna be able to hear. You'll have to take those off. So